Okay. So right off the very first thing, I just want to say that I wouldn't be talking to you if it wasn't for Smeth's video. I just at least want
Okay.
to give him that credit. And honestly, it was a super offhanded comment that you made. Like it was so devoid of like what the conversation was about, and that I think that's why it triggered me so much. You just
Mhm.
sort of threw in like a offhanded, shitty remark about polyamory, and I was like, wow, that point didn't need to be made there at all. That seemed like a really weird blow at uh like not just my lifestyle, but one that I'm like heavily invested in promoting positivity about and like good information towards. So I was just sort
Mhm.
of stunned. Um,
Mhm.
and I like the first, I was like, worked to the first 2 hours of that conversation to get to some of the meat where it was at, and it was tough. You both were just like, bam, for like 2 hours straight,
Yeah, that's true.
and
Yeah.
then it was getting
We
good, and I was
eventually
like,
got.
oh, yeah, you made a little progress.
Yeah, I would say that that's probably right. Yeah, I think that we actually ended up talking about that at the end of it, which is that I think a lot of the time, just sort of structurally as a result of the way that like the internet benefits you, in terms of like growing an audience, in terms of all that, that like a lot of people end up sort of just taking one side and being very, very like intensely invested in like defending that one side,
Sure.
really regardless of the topic. And yeah, I think that's like a problem that we are dealing with just culturally, and that's always been a problem. But I think it's becoming more of a problem because we're able to like super, super, um, super serve like individual groups, and because we now have like a national media organization, like instead of super serving, the city of Pittsburgh and its 300,000 people, we're instead super serving the 300,000 people who have this very, very, very niche, political views. And if you're able to successfully super serve 300,000 people, that's a very good living. And That's a problem because it means that you end up being in these echo chambers where you think that your 300,000 people are the national conversation because you're talking to people who are in Oklahoma, you're talking to people who are in Texas, you're talking to people in California, blah, blah, blah. But the truth is that no, you represent those 300,000 people. So we are still living in bubbles, but it's more sort of secretive that those bubbles are the bubbles that we're existing in, because we think that they're more like representative of the country than obviously, yes, when we talk about Pittsburgh media, it's media for Pittsburgh. And so obviously it's not representative of what's going on in California. But yeah.
Yeah, I understand that pretty well. I guess just to give you some kind of idea of how I interact with the space and information. When COVID hit, I'm super germophobic. I deliberately made my algorithm give me conservative articles about COVID, and like I would say that with like for somebody who can't have any formal training for that like first year and a half, I was the most informed person on COVID out of everybody I know. I have friends who are doctors, pharmacists. I talk to a lot of people when I'd ask them questions. I'd be like, dude, I'll ask you because I'd get from both sides of it just to try to get as much as I possibly could to try to like make
Mhm.
sure that I'm not because
Sure.
for me I'm terrified of getting like sick. So I just like I don't want information from one source. I'm gonna get it from all sources. I'm not looking for information to I want information that's going to benefit me, not information that's going to make me look good. And that's kind of how I approach most things. And now
Mhm.
because of that too, I also get left and right media on my algorithm because of all the COVID stuff. So I think I have a
Yeah.
pretty good grasp of and it does seem like every article that I get uh seems to be very narrow in scope.
Mhm.
It like I see on both sides like super outrageous claims about the other ones, and it's really
Mhm.
easy to see where it's going off. Like something will seem really reasonable. Like I'll get like I would notice like I could identify the right wing like extreme like COVID articles because like once I got to the crazy part, I just look at the top and like Patriot News. Okay, this makes sense. Like you would have some like really intense like partisan name to the organization, and it would always be my cue when things got way off the rails. Whether it's a like left or right article, or if it talked about like forcefully vaccinating people, I'd go up to the top and it would be like I can't remember the names on the left. left-wing media ones weren't as obviously like left-wing, so they don't stick out to me. But like that's when I would just like go to the top and be like, what am I reading?
Right, right.
So if you think that the ideas that I have are like crazy or whatever, feel free to call me on it. But I probably can back it up with at least some kind of source. Uh,
Sure.
so what I wanted to talk to you about was you seem to have really weird ideas about polyamory, and from what I gathered is that you know people who've been polyamorous, and this is where you're getting your perspective from.
Yeah, I grew up in a context, without going into too much detail, because I hopefully this is not going to be too much about either you as a person or me as a person, but rather just the concept of
Yeah,
polyamory. But yeah, I've got a good deal of understanding of what it means. Less so to be involved in polyamory, but more to be growing up in a context where polyamory is prevalent among the adults in one's life. Um,
sure.
and I think that having I don't think that polyamory is like uh, terrible and unworkable for adults. I
Mhm.
think it's terrible and unworkable for kids to live through. And the reason for that is that I think that children really desperately need stability in their lives. And I think that that stability is very difficult when the adults in one's life are changing regularly. And so it's certainly better to have like a stable, primary partner. But even having secondary partners who are sort of coming in and out of the kid's life, I think is really difficult and harmful for the kid. And I also think that it's difficult and harmful for a kid to feel that love can be stratified in a way that I think it often is in polyamorous relationships, because there are primary relationships and there are sort of secondary relationships that matter less. And I think particularly in an environment where there are multiple kids, um, kids, regardless of what their parents are like and who their parents are constantly comparing the way that they're treated by their parents versus the way that their siblings are being treated by their parents. But when there's something built in where the parents clearly do have stratified love for the adults in their lives, the idea of stratified love for kids and between siblings becomes something that uh, dominates the mind of those children, I think, quite frequently. Um, so that's sort of basically where I would start it at.
Okay. So there's a couple things here that I gotta clarify. When you say regularly changing, what does that mean?
Um,
Like every 4 years? Are we anticipating like
yeah,
different partners every
sure.
2 months? Okay, so even like up to every 4 years,
Even four
they're being
years, even 4 years is still far too frequent, right?
okay. Um,
Because I think that ideally a kid would have like two parents from 0 to 18 that are together, right? I think that is the ideal for kids.
I don't know if that's the case. So I have definitely read research that suggests that when there's more hands on deck, that there is more time and a broader variety of experience that kids can get that are positive having additional adults in there. So kind of like the idea that like it takes a village. Like if you have so like let's say this is not my case, but let's say you lived with like your mother and your grandmother and your grandfather. Having these additional adults in their life would be a positive, even if you were to become successful enough to like have your own house with just you and your wife. The removal of the grandmother and the grandfather as a constant force in their life
Mhm.
is not going to be seen as a negative anymore.
So grandparents are stable, right?
Well, they die.
Right, but until they die, they are stable in that they are not going to be alive and nonetheless move on. Like for example, in terms there's been plenty of research on the differences between divorce implications for kids versus the implications of a death of a parent, and it seems pretty clear that a death of a parent is a lot better for kids compared to a divorce, particularly if it's a messy divorce in terms of the outcomes of those children when adults. And the reason for that,
Sure.
I would venture, is probably going to be because the divorce really makes the kid struggle with an understanding of their own love and their relationship to the parent, and that struggle with like what it means to have love with a person, I think is a lot deeper and more of a difficulty than the loss in and of itself, with an understanding of continuation of the love, regardless of a continuation of the relationship, if that makes sense.
It does, but I think that you're missing a big component here. The reason why it's
Mhm,
such like more or less like a meme for the kid to ask like is it my fault that my parents are getting divorced is because that kids do tend to burden themselves with some sort of responsibility for adults' actions like that. I think that there's
mhm,
more harm that comes from that with the parent being gone during a divorce than with a death. Like a kid's not gonna be like, am I the reason why my mom died? That's not going to happen.
mhm.
So
Sure.
I think it's kind of hard to differentiate between those things. But also, I don't think this would speak to, say, if you have a primary partner.
Mhm,
And although I'm not, so I advocate for polyamory in a way that it is. I guess let me put it this way: I see a lot of problem with the way that people practice polyamory being expressed online, and it's part of the reason why even before streaming, I had like I had like almost 1,000 people just casually on a polyamory blog that I was writing because it's just there's a lot of people who positively express some really fucking stupid practices, and it kind of blows my
mhm,
mind. So
mhm,
I would say that some people are doing a really bad job of representing what this really positive idea is. And to me, all that it really means is not letting tradition dictate the kinds of experiences that you can have with other willing people in an adult relationship context. Let me just uh, make sure that we're really clear on that. So if you meet somebody and you think that there's a chance that you're going to have like some kind of really positive experience with them, like whether it be like romantic or sexual, the fact that you have a partner should not be the thing that says, okay, well, actually you can't do this because there's
Yeah,
already somebody else in your life.
if you were talking about adults, fine. I don't care if you're talking about adults, right? What adults do between adults is fine. What's
Yeah,
relevant is when the kids are involved. And so if you're raising kids, I think that your primary focus should be on your kids. So in the same way that I have no issue with people who work 70 hours a week, void context. But if you're a parent of a 4-year-old, you should not be working 70 hours a week, right?
sure. And I also think too, I don't care if you have 0 partners or if you have 7 partners, if you're not making time to make sure that you're fulfilling your role as a parent, then you have an issue.
Sure. But so the point, the question of like if you're attempting to make a claim that like this is or isn't good for adults, like I just don't care, right? Like there's no like and I would argue that the job of marriage and the job of family structure, and the focus there is the structure, right? The job there has to do with kids. It's not about adults. Like if you want to have whatever life you want to have as an adult, like rock on, right? But kids are forced to live through the family that they were born into,
Yeah.
and they have no choice about the matter. And so, therefore, the job of families must be to protect the interest of those kids above and beyond the interest of the adults. So, if you're saying that this is good for adults, I just don't care. It's not
Well,
relevant to the question. To the
what I'm
question.
trying to say is that I'm not going to make any claims that polyamory is always good, regardless of the context. I think a lot of people do it in ways that are bad. So I'm
Mhm.
not defending like all polyamory. I'm not like I think
Yeah.
there are
So
people
let's
that
focus
make
on.
really bad choices. And so I think that you said so the other thing was how did you say it, like a layered approach to love,
Mhm.
stratified love. Okay, so I've always been really vocal with basically anybody that seems to notice that there is a different way that I love different people. A lot of my friends used to say, I think you love your dog more than you love your wife and your kid. I said, no, I love my dog differently. When I love I wouldn't say that I love my wife or my kid more than one another. I love them differently. It's a different kind of feeling that I have. But I would say that I love my wife, my kid, and my dog with the maximum amount that I can love someone or something. When I love when I if I say I love my wife with all of my heart, if I love my dog with all my heart, I love my kid with
If
all
there
my heart.
was,
There's not a measured amount of love. It's not like I only have
I think
so
there is. I
much.
don't agree with that.
Oh,
I don't
then
agree with that.
that's crazy to me.
If you, well, so, okay, if you were given a situation where it was going to cost 20% of all of your savings to save your dog,
Yes,
it would be a serious question for you, presumably.
I would
It
do
would
it
not be a
instantly.
serious, okay, how about 70?
I'm telling you right now that if any one of these three people needed an excess amount of my resources, I would do it without thinking because it is not only
Okay,
would I have an
okay,
emotional
fine,
response to do so, but it's also my duty to not consider the
fine,
cost.
fine. You have a choice. You have to choose to either save your dog or your kid. You're going to choose your kid, right?
Yeah, there is so there
Okay, so
are different levels of
there
duty
is
that
a
I have
clear,
though. It has nothing to do with my love.
okay, but there's a difference there in terms of which one comes first and which one comes second.
Well, I
And
did say that I love them all maximally, but I love them all differently.
no,
And these
right. So
different
it's
loves
different.
have different levels of duty
There's,
associated with them.
okay, fine. If you want to talk about duty instead of love, that's fine. But the duty that you hold for your kid is above and beyond the duty that you hold for your dog.
It's above and beyond the duty that I hold for everything else.
For everything and everyone other than
Yeah,
your kid. Okay,
yeah. When
that's
it comes
probably
to well, let
reasonable.
me. I don't think everything is like a one-to-one thing. I don't think if it's like you have you if I spend $5 on my wife, I was wrong to not spend $5 on my kid instead in that moment. But there is a duty to make sure that I'm fulfilling the needs and to some degree the
Mhm.
wants of all the people that I would consider to be like maximally loved or have like this high level of duty to.
Okay. Um, okay. And that high level of duty,
Mhm.
the people that are included in your perception of high level duty changes more than the changes of the people who are a component of high level duties who are not in polyamorous relationships.
Can be. Certainly. So I think some people
Well,
value
not
their
can be,
friends. Well,
does,
some people
by
value their
definition.
friends this highly. Some people value their parents more than they value their children. Even it's some people are really fucking weird, man. But even when it would
Well, hold
come
up, not
to,
fucking weird. That's wrong. That's like morally wrong. You should not love your parents more than you love your kids. That's a problem, right?
I would say it was a problem. I do think it's generally a problem. Yeah.
Not generally. Like it is categorically wrong to love your parents more than you love your kids.
Um, I can't make claims for other people like that, but I think that I would. You'd be hard pressed to find a situation where I think it's any level of acceptable.
Okay. So your kid, when you have a kid, has to come first across the board.
Um, sure. But I think that there are
Okay.
certain things that so I don't think that doing a like if we're gonna like tier out harms, like the lowest level of harm being like a one, two, or three, uh I think that if you have to pick between doing like a one, two, or three to your child to perform a seven, eight, or a nine action of like harm reduction for somebody else who is very important, this is sometimes a choice that you have to make. Like if you say, "Hey, sorry, we can't go to the ball game. I have to take your mom to the hospital. This is going to be a given. Even though this ball game may be very important, tough shit. This is what's more important right now." Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, so doing something that is good for somebody else can come before the child. It's just all has to do with like we're constantly running triage,
um,
more or less.
huh. Constantly running triage. I don't know if it's triage.
That's the best. It's the best analogy I could come up with.
Yeah, I
I'd
think
say
that
it's akin to that.
there does need to be an understanding that kids come first across the board. And so when you're talking about like protecting the parent, like protecting the parent, I think is like important for sure. But ultimately, uh, I think there needs to be an understanding the kid comes first.
Sure. Part of me putting my family first too is making sure that I am taking care of my own wants and needs to a sufficient degree that I am not going to be less able to perform my duties as well.
Okay. Would you be able to perform your duties as a parent if you were monogamous?
I think that I would be less good at it for sure. I think that suppressing,
Why?
because I think that it's an important part of me. It's something that I had chosen just on my own accord to not pursue, and it lessened me. It's something that was on my mind a lot, and I felt really drained by not. I don't know what the right word is, but by lack of participation in something that's so important to me. I think I was just less in all categories of my life.
Okay. So
I don't believe in monogamy. I don't believe that it's like a real thing. It's just a choice that people make. And for me to say
wait,
like
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Just to clarify, when you say it's not a real thing, it's a choice that people make. What do you mean by that?
there's no like inherent structure that exists of being human that says humans are monogamous.
What do you mean? There's no inherent. I don't quite understand what you're saying. There's no inherent
There's nothing
structure.
about being a human that means human is monogamous. This is not like an objective truth about being human.
Is there anything about there's an objective truth about humans that make us like have any obligate like yeah, what is it about a human that makes us um love our kids?
Um, I don't know. I think there's a combination of different factors, but it does seem to be the case that generally we are going to highly value them. I mean,
Okay.
I know.
Because
I mean,
even if
I have
even
like a multitude of reasons why I care about my own child.
yeah.
But this isn't always the same for everybody. Some people
Okay.
don't value their children.
So my point though is that like it's not objective. So when you're looking for like an objective like this is why monogamy, you're not going to get an objective this is why monogamy. It's a social structure, right? All
And
social
it's also an
structures.
agreement. It's a social agreement, and I don't agree with it, and I genuinely don't agree with it. So to force myself into like this institution of monogamy when I don't agree with it, um, it hurts me.
Okay,
I'm
so
lessening myself.
are you describing polyamory as something that you enjoy, or are you describing it as something that you need?
I would say that it is the truth of the way that I experience relationships. I don't understand like I think there's a part of people's brains that just go polyamory that doesn't make any fucking sense at all to me. Why would you do that?
Right, but there are
And
certain
I have
things
the
that you might.
opposite view for myself. Like why would I ever have one partner? That doesn't make any sense.
I might walk down the street and have like intense desire for someone who doesn't have desire for me,
Sure.
right? Okay, so like if you're describing like okay, you have a desire for polyamory, like you have an ability to overcome that desire if you think that, hey, that person doesn't like me. And so therefore, I'm not going to force myself on them because that's wrong. Right.
I
So
don't
if
think
you
it's
were to
analogous to say
think,
not raping somebody and
sure.
not
So
being
my point though is
polyamorous.
if you fine, but my point though is if you understood an action that that you were doing to be immoral, even if it was something that you desired, you would be able to stop yourself from doing it. And that would be a
Yep.
reasonable expectation of you.
Of course, and I would say that that is exactly how I operate. I am a staunch deontologist. If something's wrong, it's
Okay.
wrong.
Cool. Um, I don't believe you, but that's a different question, conversation. It's a different conversation. It's not relevant. But I
Okay.
just do want to.
Well,
Yeah.
but it's important to inform in this conversation. If I say something's right or wrong, it means the system that I have for myself says that it's right or wrong. If it's wrong, I cannot do it. And if I do it, because I'm not perfect, it's a tragedy, and I need to hold myself accountable for it. I have morally failed
Um,
myself.
yeah, that I believe more. But the idea that you never do something that you think is
No,
immoral,
I
I
am a staunch
yeah.
deontologist in that I strictly believe these things, and I do absolutely do my best within my capacity to follow my own system. And when I don't, um I consider myself to be being a very bad person in that moment. And I need to take
Okay,
steps
that part I
to
believe.
better myself
Yeah,
so that I
that
don't do that
that
anymore.
version of that version of deontology, I believe. Okay. Uh,
I'm not religious.
okay.
That's all I got.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so if you were to be convinced uh, that polyamory had repercussions for your kid,
Mhm.
would you stop?
I would have to weigh it. I would have to say, okay, these are the repercussions. How bad is this? Now, how bad would
Sure.
it be for me to be in a state where I cannot accept myself as how I understand myself to be? For me to suppress something that's super important to me, how is this going to affect me? How is this going to interact with my emotional state on a daily basis? How is that effect on my emotional state on a daily basis going to impact my ability to perform regular duties, to be more
Okay, and
mindful of
so
things?
when you're weighing that,
Yeah.
are you weighing your own emotional state um, in accordance to the way that that affects your kid, or are you weighing your emotional state as an end in and of itself?
No, no, and into how it would affect those around me. So when I say how it's going to affect myself, how it affects me is going to affect how I interact with the world around me.
Right. So my question though is, are you considering your own mindset in and of itself to be an end thing that is worth focusing on above your kid, or are you focusing on
No,
your
not above
kid's
my kid.
outcomes? Okay, so you're focused. So you're if you were to be convinced that polyamory was bad for your kid, you would then get to the question of, is the fact that polyamory bad for my kids more bad for my kid than it would be for me not to be polyamorous, knowing that that would affect my emotional state and thereby the way that I interact with my kid?
Yeah, I would say at that point it's not a choice to me. I would have to hold off on exploring relationships with other people until my kid is no longer in the house.
Okay, cool. Um, so then let's focus exclusively on that component, not on the component of whether or not void the kid, it would be um, a problem. Okay, you agree that stability is important for a kid, yes?
Uh, Generally, I think so.
Okay. Describe how equivalent stability can be achieved in a environment where there are partners coming in and out of the relationship with the primary caretakers versus an environment where they have a single caretaker and, or excuse me, dual partner caretakers, just two of them.
So I think a lot of how they're going to experience this has to do with the norms that they're exposed to. And so I think that I guess I don't see stability as like the end all be all of like this is what's best for a kid. This isn't like uh, s- uh the standard at which we would weigh all things against for like what are you providing for your. I think that raising my kid to be an open-minded person and seeing the world as it is changing and not as it is traditionally being held as to be a really positive thing. So I also think that it's a really good thing for my kid to understand that you do not have to be a monogamous person when you grow up if you don't want to. It's not something we talk about, but it's something that I lead by example for. That nobody else should be telling you what is right for you and how to live your life. Um, One of the I think that it's a lot more important than making sure that everything is completely stable. That you are giving your child important moral ideas and living by them and showing them how you can be a content and happy person by doing things that are what's best for you and the people that you care about. This is something that I hold to be one of the most important things a parent can do. I think like the two most important things you can do as a parent is one, allowing your child to practice having freedom so that when they have real freedom, that they don't
Hmm.
fuck it all up. That is
Sure.
probably the most important job you have as a parent. And the second most important job you have as a parent is to get your child to understand that that they need to develop their own genuine ideas about what is right and wrong and that they have to follow that. One of the things that I've told my kid several
Yeah.
times is that if you're doing what you think is right and not what you want, but what you actually believe is right, It doesn't matter what anybody says, even me, that's what you should be doing. It doesn't mean you're not going to get grounded or we're not going to have consequences if I think you're fucking up. Because I need you to, it's my job to make sure you're reevaluating if I think you're way far off. But this is the most important thing for you to be doing in your life. I think it's way, way too easy for people to
Yeah, I want to start. I want
get
to think
lost
about
up.
that.
And
Let's think about that. Or go for it.
and because of that, I need to lead that by example. And I think that showing my kid that despite the fact that my wife is not my only partner, that I'm able to treat my wife with absolute love. And you might disagree with the word devotion, but I don't. And that I treat every other partner that I have with equal care and consideration, and that my child doesn't have to lose anything from that. I think that shows them that relationships don't have to be defined in any particular way. And so I don't think this is going to be seen or felt as an instability.
So the equal devotion thing, I think, is a part that I really struggle with there. But I want to first just take a step back and think about the freedom component that you started with there, which I think is interesting. Because I think you're right that the job of parents, ideally, is to figure out a way by the time the kid is an adult for the kid to be able to operate in society in a way that is not reliant on the parent at that point, which requires that the parent be slowly providing more and more freedoms to the kid. But it is slow, right? It's not a thing that happens overnight.
Yeah, you don't throw your
Don't want
kid in the 8 foot end of the pool to teach him how to swim. If you do, that's child abuse. And I would say that giving your child no
I don't know if
rules.
it's child abuse. That happened to me. That happened to both to all my cousins. I'm not sure that's
Yes, you
child
guys were
abuse. But
abused. They risked you drowning to teach you how to swim.
no, they didn't risk us drowning. They were all right there waiting to grab us if we went under the water. But regardless, um,
Okay.
uh, yeah, I think that uh, kids need a structure in order to build their understandings of freedom, and they need to have that freedom be built towards. It's not an overnight thing.
I
And
agree.
part of having that freedom build is to understand the places where there isn't freedom. And so I think it is important that kids have, a bedtime when they're little. I think it is important that kids, eat at certain times, or at least are provided food at certain times. I think it is important that kids have structure in their lives, and part of the utility of that structure is that it allows kids to build routine. It allows kids to have an understanding of, like, this is the stuff that's constant in my life, and then these are the things that I'm going to think about. But back over here, the fact that I brush my teeth in the morning and at night is not something that I'm going to think about. The fact that I make my bed, the fact that two times a week, whatever it is, I wash the dishes. That's not something that I'm going to think about. It's something that's just a reality of today is Tuesday. I wash the dishes,
Yeah.
and building that in, I think, is really important. So that stability is necessary to grow the freedom. That stability is less important by the time you're an adult, perhaps, because by the time you're an adult, you're able to have already had that understanding built out for the rest of your life,
You're able to create your own
ideally.
stability. Yeah.
And you're able to build exactly right. You're able to build your own stability. But the stability needs to be provided to you as a kid.
I
And I
agree.
think that,
But I don't
go for it.
think that I think that where we choose to provide that stability isn't necessarily always important for it to be the same for every kid.
I don't agree with you. I think that there is across the board a need for uh, children writ large to be provided bedtime. I think there's a
I think
need
some
across the
things
board.
are going to normally be the same, barring certain
Okay.
exceptions. But I don't think that all things are always the same for all kids.
I think that you're right that not all things are necessary for all people, but I think that part of that is that you should start with the presumption that your baby is very similar to other babies. And then as the baby grows up, you should recognize here are the different ways that my baby, now 7-year-old, is not quite the same as other 7-year-olds. But the presumption at the time of infancy should be that the infant is approximately equivalent to other infants in most ways
I,
that are important for their
I
structures.
mean, as somebody who raised a baby, I will say uh, it's true in the same way that I think that for the vast majority of them, you should raise all baby puppies the same way. Babies are basically just small animals. They're not really people yet. They have nothing like you can't talk to them, you can't inform them of anything. There are just things that have to be done at certain times if you want things to go well. Like the you have the same approach as you do having an animal in that there is no way to do anything communicatively that is any kind of matter of importance. It is just about what you do and when you do it. I know it
Um,
doesn't feel good to hear me say that.
yeah, I don't agree with you in the way you're describing babies, but the operational component there, I
That's what I'm
broadly do.
talking about.
Yeah,
Insofar as how
operational.
you have to behave towards the baby, it is, I would say that structurally it is the same as how you would have to treat like having a
Yeah,
puppy
I don't like the
insofar
term
as
structurally, but operationally I can get behind.
okay.
Um,
Say like
I
at this time this happens, at this time this happens. You can't rely on the baby
yeah,
for to do anything on its own whatsoever. That's just like
and so
here is the
therefore,
manual, follow the fucking manual.
okay, and so therefore, to build the stability for that infant, you should assume the infant is identical to other infants because operationally it is.
Yeah,
Um,
we have a manual.
and
We have enough information to say that there's a manual for babies, follow manual.
sure, okay, um, okay, so follow the manual for babies, and then slowly, as the baby ceases to be a baby and starts to develop its own personality and develop it, blah blah blah, you should start treating it more and more like an individualized person.
Yes.
Um, but nonetheless, even by the time that they're 10, there are a lot of things that you should have in common with other 10-year-olds in terms of the way that the 10-year-old is treated. Um, I think that in terms of the way that young kids are treated, that one of the things that they need, and there's very good evidence for this in terms of single parent households, although admittedly much less so for polyamorous relationships, because polyamory, though not particularly new, it's new that people are willing to admit to it. Um, uh, and I think that the the single parent household outcomes are materially worse for kids than they are for dual parent households, and that is something that is worth thinking about, and it's worth thinking about like why is that the case?
Sure. And I think one of the largest reasons why it is worse is that there is zero division of like physical and emotional labor of the child. When you have one person providing all of the needs for a child, not only is it going to be nearly impossible for you to make sure that everything is always taken care of because you're human, you're gonna fuck up, you're gonna forget, you're going to just fall short at times. But when there's two parents, there is this division of labor. You have two different people that can provide like teaching, caring, just
Yeah,
performing obligations. And I would say if there's more people, then there is an even greater division of labor. And this benefits all parties
single parent households
more.
single parent households, overwhelmingly, there are other adults in the life of the kid, right? Because very frequently, single parent households, they will date, right? The parent will date people outside, right? And
Sure.
so there will be other adults that come into the life of the kid. Nonetheless, the outcome for the kids seems to be quite bad. And also, it's worth noting that the relationship of those secondary parents for parental figures who are not actually parents to the kid, but are simply dating the parent of the kid, um, those are often abusive relationships, disproportionately abusive, right?
Sure. And I think that when you have a stable relationship already, as as uh as ideal like husband and wife, there is extra oversight to make sure that there is not going to be a harmful person being introduced into the kid's life. And when you have two people that are committed parents, uh it
Mhm.
seems like there is a greater oversight to ensure that there is somebody who is going to actually be introduced into the kid's life. It is somebody who is willing to participate in a because I think it's
I'm
pretty
sorry,
easy
I
to
lost the
see.
last second. I lost the second half of that sentence. Could you repeat
Oh,
it?
I think that you have a greater oversight to ensure that if the other person is going to be in the kid's life, that they're going to be a positive force on the kid. I think it's really easy to see how a single person who is dating is willing to overlook certain obligations to their kid. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying like I think there's an understanding of how that happens. But when there are two people who are already there for the child, I think it is much, much more likely that somebody is going to stand up and go, "Hey, you're fucking up. This person is not okay to be around our child," because they're not going to have they're not going to have the blinders on if they're
Yeah,
not dating that other person. They're going to see things from an outside perspective.
yeah.
So it's
No, I
very
think
much like
we,
there's a supervisor. They're going, "No, absolutely not. I see what's
so I think
happening
that
here.
we
Stop this."
so I think that we discussed this on Twitter, I believe. You asked me uh, if I'm in support of single parent households, and
Mhm.
my answer was no, and that I think that probably an environment like the one that you seem to be describing of two parent household with tertiary members of the adult sort of supervisor role coming in and out, uh, that is almost certainly going to be better than a single parent with secondary parental roles coming in and out. Uh, but I don't think that it's as strong as two stable parents without tertiary people coming in, right?
So I understand that's what you think. If there is
Well,
a
just
person
to
who,
clarify, do you understand why I think it?
yeah, I understand why you think that. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
just trying to say like, yes, I understand without also agreeing to the point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, go on.
Uh, so when you have a single parent, would you say that they should be compelled to not date, or
I
would it be
think
that
that
when they date, they should be taking necessary steps to make sure that who they're introducing to their child is somebody who is going to be a positive force, and if they're not, it's on them to make sure that that stops immediately.
um, yeah, I think that single parent households uh, have an obligation to be really, 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 really careful. And even when they are careful, uh, there is a just a fact of the situation, which is that it is going to be worse regardless than if they were in a dual parent household.
Well, they can't get to there if they don't date.
No, I understand that. I get that. So yeah, it's a bad place to be. This is why I think that guys who leave are pieces of shit, and this is why I think that it's really important to, um, if someone gets pregnant, I think there's an obligation for parents to be very very serious about what it means to raise a kid, and that should be the primary focus, and that everything else needs to go by the wayside because nothing else is as important. Um, and
I
I think
can't
that
tell you how much I agree. I'm not with my
yeah,
daughter's, or I'm not with my kid's mom. Uh, and I was the dad that went to court. Well, actually, it was simply the threat of court that got my child to be released to me because uh, everybody knows that I'm going to win that because it's very apparent that I'm a fit parent. Uh, and so when I see the other parent not doing something that or doing things and not doing things that are appropriate, then say, okay, it's just my kid now. If you want to visit, you can visit or whatever, but like my kid now. I think that we're on the same page insofar as like the level of responsibility that there is towards the child. I think most people who have basically been like this isn't how I feel, but I think this is how they feel. Wash their hands of the responsibility of being a parent. It's not being forced upon them. They're not going to seek that out. Most people do not seek that out when there has been, you know, like if the court doesn't give you your kid, and that's why we know that there's deadbeat dads out there, right? Because there's a lot of benefit to just not having to be a parent anymore if you care more about yourself. It's not very common that at least the father goes and gets the kid from the mother without there being any like physical abuse. So I don't think that there's anything that you're going to say to me that I'll disagree with in terms of that you have a high level of responsibility to your kid, um, and that you have to make sacrifices. All this stuff I'm going to strongly agree with you in. The part where I disagree is that a person uh, is incapable of determining people that are appropriate and inappropriate to be around their kid. I think what it really comes down to is um, if we're trusting a parent to raise their kid, and I'm not saying all parents should be trusted to raise their own kids because some of them are fucking dog shit. But if we're saying you are a fit parent, you have sound decision making, and you do have your kid's best interest at heart, that when you're choosing partners and you're choosing which partners to bring around your kid, that we're also just agreeing that like this is something that is not necessarily going to be a negative. You're improving yourself to have your kid's
So I
best
want to be
interest at
careful
heart.
here. I want to be careful here because I'm not proposing that certainly that all kids of polyamorous relationships should be like taken from them.
Oh, I
Like
don't
that's
think you're saying
obviously
that. I don't think you're saying that.
what I'm saying is that there are decisions that can be made on behalf of children that are better and worse. And even if something is not bad enough that the kid should be taken, we can still recognize those decisions as being worse for the kid, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay,
I think
so
if
I would
I would say even
say,
if a kid like really wants to play baseball and you just refuse to let them play baseball because you don't want to take them, fucking suck. You're being a shitty parent. If that's your reason why, because you don't want to drive them to practice, you fucking suck. I'm not saying your kid
uh,
should be taken away from you, but I
yeah,
think that
okay,
you're automatically qualifying yourself as a less good parent than you should be.
okay. So do you think that in the same way as if you're taking your kid away from baseball, you fucking suck, kid shouldn't be taken away? Do you think that you're comfortable saying a similar statement about if you are introducing uh, adults into a kid's life that are under vetted, that you fucking suck?
Oh yeah, I think that you should do a good amount of vetting. Yeah.
Okay. What is the process for vetting that you feel you're comfortable with?
I think the most important part is time. You need to have some time to you need to have enough time to have enough experiences with that person to see how they react to certain things to get a good understanding of like their ideas of what it means to I mean, ideally you would get an understanding of what it means for them to be around kids. But I think
Mhm.
usually the best we can do is to get a good moral gauge on the person and to see how they interact with other people. Uh, and you have to develop some level of trust. Uh, if
Okay, I
if I
like
trust a
the
person not to lie to me, which is a pretty high bar, they're
yeah.
probably going to be good enough to be around my kid. Because I don't, well, I treat people as though I trust them often. I do not trust people very easily.
I like the idea of the time component there. Um, most monogamous relationships that produce children have been together for a matter of years before they have the kid.
Mhm.
So there's been a lot of vetting, right? And they've probably lived with that monogamous parent or soon to become parent prior to them having a kid together. They've probably done a lot of getting to know each other and really deeply understanding who the other partner is. I don't think that that can be parallel to an equivalent degree with a person that you're not living with. I don't think that it can be parallel to an equivalent degree with someone who is not your primary partner. I don't think it can be compared parallel degree to someone you've only known for 6 months.
Sure. And so, um, when you brought up on Twitter about, I think you said something to the degree of like loving the partners equally. I I
Mm-hmm.
I treat my partners equally in the ways that make sense, like for context. So if I've been with somebody for a long enough time to where I'm happy with them being around my kid, that doesn't mean they get to pick up my kid from school. There are certain things that just doesn't make any sense to allow them certain levels of access. Like I
Mm-hmm.
trust you, but there's a big difference between I trust you and I trust you not to like be abusive to my kid when when I'm around you and my kid. Uh, there's just extra precautionary measures that need to be taken in almost every circumstance where I'm
Sure.
going to trust you alone with my kid. So if I've been dating somebody for like 5 to 6 months, they're probably not picking up my kid unless they
Mhm.
have some kind of like really really special relationship with my kid. And I've had one partner who I would have been totally fine picking up my kid from school, and I think they did one time. And this was somebody that I had known for years before dating them.
Mhm.
And I would say that I don't think anybody else has ever crossed that threshold,
Yeah, I want to flag
including
that
my wife,
really
but
quick.
just only because my wife can't pick up my kid because she can't drive. Her eyes aren't good.
So I want to flag that really quickly. You said would have. Are you still together with this partner?
Nope, not by my choice.
Okay. And what happened to the relationship between that partner and your kid?
Uh, they're still friends.
Do you think that your kid still sees them as much as they did while you were dating?
Um, no, no, of course not. But they didn't see
And do
them
you
as
think
much
that
prior either, and they were friends then too.
and do you think that that may have had an impact on your kid?
Yeah, so I would say that there's both a positive and a negative that happened here. The negative is obviously that they don't have as much access to somebody that they trusted, and even before I dated that person, I would say somewhere akin to like uh, not like I wouldn't say like a parental role, because there was a different type of closeness to where like one of the things I found appealing about this person is that my kid felt like they could go to them about things that, like, I don't want to talk to my parents about this. You know what I mean? It's not if your kid doesn't want to talk to you about something, it's not necessarily a slight on you. It's just that like some things can be awkward to talk to your parents about. You don't want to. I didn't want to talk to my mom about everything. I didn't want to talk to my dad about everything. It can get
Yeah, I didn't
goofy.
want to talk to my parents about a lot of things either. I think that it would have been a lot better if I had a relationship with them where I was comfortable talking to them about stuff.
Um, sure, but I think that there is a good value in having somebody who isn't your parent, because at the end of the day, your parent is
Right.
always going to be a judge of you.
I agree with that, but I think that that's the role of aunts and uncles and, cousins. It's the role
Yeah, well,
of
there's not a lot of that going.
grandparents.
There's not a lot of that going on here, man. There's not a lot of people. I don't have a very large family. Unfortunately, a lot of
Mhm.
people in my family are gone. A lot of them, and then I would not the cousins. They're not fucking coming to my house ever. Garbage people. I have more cousins that have like felony charges or are currently incarcerated than not. That shit just ain't happening.
Gotcha.
Um,
Yeah, I think that that's
and so
yeah.
you got to take what you
Unfortunately,
can get there. And so I would say this
yeah, I
person
agree.
is has
I
returned
agree.
to having more of that role, which I also see as invaluable.
The part that I'm trying to get to is that I think there's an importance, because I don't think that the relevance of grandparents or aunts and uncles is about blood by any stretch. I think it's the relevance there is that there's a permanence to the relationship, albeit a secondary relationship, but it's still a permanent relationship. And the part that I'm concerned about that happens, in my experience, quite a bit in polyamorous relationships is that as a result of breakdown between adults, there are ties that are important to kids that are torn away from the kids in ways that are damaging.
Sure, and that's why I think it's been important to accommodate that. Um, like in no way whatsoever would I ever try to impede that relationship that exists. And I think actually when you said it, it really rang true. It does feel very much like an aunt type of relationship. Because when I grew up, I had a close aunt who sometimes I would most of the time I would favor more greatly than my mom in terms of just like basically everything. So not quite to that degree, but I think that
Mhm.
it is just sort of that role. It is familial, but it is not authoritative in that way. And I
Sure.
think that's invaluable, and I have done everything I can to facilitate the continuation of that because I think it's really important.
Yeah. Um,
And so
I
while
think
there is a loss
that
of immediate physical access, this sort of relationship gets to get strengthened in that way more because they become less of an extension
mm,
of me. And
yeah.
and in this case, me and my wife, in more of a return to more of like just this previous rule, which had its own unique benefits to it.
Right, but I think that kids glom on to the roles that they experience people through.
Sure.
And so while I think it's important and good that this person is still a component of your kid's life, I think that there is a sense of loss for the kid in that the role of this person who's relevant to them is changing and is becoming smaller than it was at one point. And I think that that uh, can be really difficult for kids. Because again, I think that the structure and the stability is really, really important. And I think that drift apart between adults affecting a sort of practical drift apart for the kid um, can be really damaging.
Um, I would say it can be, sure, and just much in the same way that if I have a falling out with one of my friends, who my kid would happen to be close to, this could have a similar effect. But it would never be the
I
prescription that you shouldn't have friends around your kids.
I agree with that. I in my adult life have not had equivalent falling outs with friends as I have seen friends have with partners.
Oh, I haven't either. It just Froggy style. That thank you for the super chat. Nothing to read, just some clapping hand or high fiving. I appreciate you, buddy. However, it's just because I have when I wasn't the primary parent for my kid, I had already sorted out probably who I'm gonna be friends with until the other ones like me or them die. At this point, we've established
Mhm.
like decade plus long relationship to where we've already been through like our beefs and shit, and we kind of know how to navigate that. But I think it's pretty common to be an adult and have a falling out with a friend. I mean, I see it happen amongst my friends.
Not to a parallel degree. I just don't buy that. I think that there is a sense in which platonic relationships are across the board um, more stable and long term uh, than are sexual relationships.
What correct? Which there runs a risk of them being an even more regular and consistent force that then gets removed when that happens. And if we're talking about something as bad because of the potential of a fallout, I would say that this is also a really bad risk, but we're not going to condemn it in any way for that risk being there.
I think that the reason that like by that logic, um, a two-parent household would be in a worse position than a single parent household in that the secondary caregiver would never become as close to the kid as the primary caregiver. But the reality is that kids build relationships, deep relationships, much quicker than do adults.
Mhm.
And in a matter of 6 months, a person can become one of the most important people in a kid's life in a way that is not quite parallel for adults. Um, and I think that that's why it's so difficult to be in a single parent household because you are building those very, very, very serious relationships from your end, and perhaps somewhat less serious from the end of the adult relationships with people regularly and repeatedly. Those are being destructed. And so, if you're talking about a relationship that might last for 10 years and then fall apart with a friend, that's quite different than a relationship or repeated relationships with people that might last 3 years and each again and again and again are falling apart. That's something that is really, really difficult for kids.
Sure. Well, there's no guarantee that any relationship is going to last. Marriages fail at a
For sure,
remarkably
but
high
there are
rate.
things that you can do that increase the chances of relationships lasting long term.
I agree, and I'm not going to introduce my kid to somebody if I don't think that I'm going to have a long-term relationship with them. Obviously, I have not always been correct, um, and nothing's perfect. However, I have seen firsthand, and it's not an extravagant claim to say that I have seen close friends in the lives of parents come in and out of the kid's life who has an exceptionally familial role with the child and leave. For example, somebody that I know had she had a woman who lived with her on and off, best friend since high school, and I think at this point, no longer talking whatsoever. This is like a they'll go years without talking, but to their kid, that is one of the most important people in the world.
I think that
And when they stop talking, that's it. That it's done for the kid. So this is not something that is um, beholden just to polyamory. And I think
I
that when
think
you're
that
a
I
parent
think that
choosing
we
a
need to
partner,
be
you're mindful
yeah,
of your
I
kid
think that we
more than
need to
you are
be
choosing your friends.
I think we need to be cognizant of risk and what increases and decreases risk rather than just is it possible for something to succeed? Because obviously, is it possible for single parent households to have good outcomes? Well, of course it's possible. There are lots of kids who've grown into you know strong independent adults um, and whose parents, single parents, were quality parents. But we are comfortable societally saying that it's better to be in a dual parent household, and so
It's
the
not even about comfort.
frustration
There's
that
just statistically this is true.
yeah, statistically it's true, and we're also just socially comfortable saying it.
Hmm.
And I think that the frustration is that um, it is my very firm belief that statistics will back this up in the future. But beyond the statistics, um, just in terms of the practical implications, I think that there are a lot of things about polyamorous relationships that parallel single parent households. And the reasons that we articulate as being the reasons for single parent household effects on kids um, are the same reasons. And I
Okay.
think that therefore we should be willing to say, like, are you a monster for being a single parent household? Of course not. Are you a monster for being a polyamorous parent? Of course not. But it would be better if you weren't.
Okay. So, I mean this. Anybody who hears this and doesn't like it, I mean this with no harm intended. Would you say that 15 years ago, a gay couple who adopts a child is doing something irresponsible because they are disadvantaging their kid by having parents that are going to be socially outcasted for being homosexual?
The social outcasting component isn't relevant because I don't think that the social outcast component is something that is either A, avoidable, or
It
B,
is voidable. They don't have to adopt a kid.
oh, okay.
They're not going
Yeah.
to
So
accidentally have
you're
a
not
kid.
asking about being gay. You're asking about being gay with a kid.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I would say that a gay parents then that there aren't reasons to believe that the relationship between parent and child, rather than the relationship between society and child, um, are going to have barriers as a result of being gay.
What I'm touching on here
Wait,
is that
did
we're
you like?
doing a
Did
disadvantage.
you see the difference that I was creating there? I was
Yeah,
saying that
I do.
like
That's why I'm
the
addressing the point,
parent
which isn't
child.
that.
Say
I
it again.
I understand what you're saying, which is why I'm pointing out my point isn't the thing that you're talking about. What
Okay.
I'm specifically talking about when we say that we have a duty to like maximize the good for our kids and like to like protect them from harm. You are introducing in a non-debatable strong cost to to the kid that you're adopting by having all these additional challenges thrown at them that through no fault of their own you are placing them into.
It's an increase of difficulty for a kid to be black, or for a kid to be Jewish, or for a kid to be Muslim or Sikh.
None of these
Um,
things are by anybody else's choice. Like you,
well, well, um, it's a choice that a person can make to raise a kid Sikh or to raise a kid Jewish. You don't have to raise them that way. It's a choice to give your kids dreadlocks as a black child. It's a choice to give your kids a name like Barack Obama instead of a name like Carl.
yeah.
Right?
So
It's a
are these
choice.
things wrong as well?
So my answer is that no, those aren't a problem because those aren't an effect on the relationship between parent and child. They're a problem between the relationship between child and society. I don't think that the parent has an obligation to get rid of the problems between child and society. I think the duty of the parent is to get rid of the differences and the issues between parent and child.
So I'm confused. I thought that the whole parent and child thing was just sort of a proxy for you should be doing your best to provide the best in all
Well,
categories
so
for
then
your
let's
child.
let's do a parallel here. Let's say that a kid falls out of a tree and breaks 2 ribs, right? And massively painful.
Yeah, it sounds like
Another
it sucks.
kid, yeah, for sure it sucks. Another kid gets punched in the stomach by their parent and breaks 1 rib,
Mhm.
right? Okay. Which one of those kids has gone through something more traumatic?
Kid who got punched in the rib because somebody made a choice that hurt
Right.
them, and it's
Right.
somebody who should be taking care of them.
Exactly right. So I
So
would say
but this isn't
that
equivalent to the gay parents, though. The gay
so
parents
I would so I would
chose to
say
become
that
parents, knowing that their kid is going to
right, but the gay parents aren't responsible for the kid being affected by the fact that the parents are gay.
But if
The
this
gay
was
parents
analogous,
are
the parents would be
responsible.
telling the kid to climb the tree, knowing that it's
No, I don't think
dangerous.
that's fair. I don't think that's fair. The equivalent, like I think that it's relevant to understand the difference between something that a parent is doing to a kid
Mhm.
versus something that is being done to a kid by society.
Sorry, give me 1 minute. My kid knew I was streaming, and they texted me that they were leaving, so I was saying goodbye.
Okay, no worries.
Uh,
Yeah, but I think that there's a difference there between things that are societal implications and the thing that the parent themselves is doing. So I don't think that there's reason to believe that the outcomes of gay or lesbian parents are worse than the effects on heterosexual parent kids.
not
Um,
anymore, but there was for sure.
there was one.
When I was in like middle school, if a kid had 2 dads, they're gonna get mercilessly bullied and fucked with for that.
Right, but that's not to do with the relationship between parent and kid. That's to do with the relationship between society and kid. That's a
But it
different
is
thing.
but it is directly the cause of a known choice that the parents made for that kid. So if
It's a choice that the parents made for the kid.
yeah, they decided
Um,
this child is going to go through life having 2 dads. I'm going to send them to school where they are not very easily and almost never going to be able to hide the fact that they have 2 dads. This is going to cause them a tremendous amount of pain and struggle to where if I did not do this, this child would not have to face whatsoever. And just to be clear, I don't think they
yeah, I
did
think
anything
that
wrong.
you're. Yeah, I get that. I don't think that you're
I'm saying that
like. Do you
sometimes,
recognize do you recognize the distinction I'm making here?
yeah, absolutely.
Between,
But what I'm saying
okay,
is that if it's wrong to do something that is true and beneficial to yourself that will have a cost or a potential cost to your child, this does not automatically make it something bad that you are doing.
okay. So then let's try it this way. You have a choice between yourself punching your kid in the stomach and breaking a rib, or the kid falling out and breaking 2 ribs, right? And so you know that that is a choice that you're making, and your kid doesn't know that it's a choice that you're making, but you are making the choice on behalf of the kid. Either you're going to punch them, or they're going to fall out of a tree.
But if they don't
And
get
the
adopted
falling
by
out of
gay
a tree is
parents, they don't have to break ribs.
okay. Just let's go through the process
Okay.
of this. You would choose for the kid to get
I would
2 ribs
choose
broken
yeah, them to get
rather
more
than
hurt
one.
with their own agency. Sure.
Okay. So you're recognizing there that things happening to a kid, bad things happening to a kid, is different than parent making bad things happen to a kid.
But you just made me make it happen to the kid in that scenario still.
Right, but the kid didn't experience it as the parent doing the harm to the kid, right?
Yeah. Whereas a kid may very well experience the parent making them have two dads, because they're gonna know that it was their choice to do it. I mean, once the kid has like the ability to think for themselves, they're gonna know like, why did you like? They may very well get bullied so hard, like, why did you guys even fucking adopt me? Like, do you have any idea how miserable my life has been? People kick my ass and shove me into lockers and shit because I have two dads. Why can't I just have a normal family? This would not be a crazy thing to hear somebody say back then.
Right, but it's not something that the parents themselves are doing to the kid. It's something that the society is doing to the kid. This is different. This is the falling out of the tree. It is not the same as the getting punched in the ribs by your parent.
I'd say that while they are not the ones directly doing the thing, they are making a choice knowing that this is very likely to happen.
Right. So it's the falling out of the tree. It's not the punching the kid in the stomach. And so the
Sure.
trauma, and so the trauma resultant of falling out of a tree is simply the experience of falling out of the tree, right?
Uh-huh.
The trauma of getting bullied at school for your parents being gay is simply the experience of being bullied at school for your parents being gay. It is not the same as your parents bullying you. It is not the same as your parents um, introducing instability into your life.
I would say that they are introducing instability into your life by giving you a very different
They're
upbringing than
not the
all other
ones
kids.
who introduced you to the bullies. That's not something the parents did.
No, they created you. They created a target on you for the bullies. Without their decision, you don't have that target on your back.
They didn't do the bullying, and they also didn't introduce you to the people who did the bullying, right? And your environment, the environment that you control fully, your household, is not an environment that is unsafe emotionally for them, because your environment of a gay household, is an environment wherein they are respected
Okay,
and they are taken seriously.
then
And so
maybe
your
I just
environment
put
is
more
the environment that
responsibility
you're
on parents
primarily
than you do.
responsible for.
Then maybe I just have a greater sense of responsibility of the parents than
No, that's not.
well, because here's
No.
the thing. I think that if I make a decision knowing that something bad is going to happen to my kid as a result of my decision, with a high degree of certainty, like I'm just that what I'm gonna do is going to be like explicitly harmful as an indirect result, I'm very likely not going to do that thing.
Okay. So if there's an indirect result of something bad happening
And I'm aware of
to
it.
your kid, and you're aware that this is an indirect implication for your kid, you're not going to do the thing.
I'd be hard pressed to. I'd have to have a really good reason. Yeah.
Okay. But you're willing to do a thing that is directly introducing instability into your kid's life.
See. Here's the thing, though. I don't think that it is. I don't think that it's like that. In so part of this too is seeing how these things do affect me. And part of it has to do with how you communicate about this type of relationship with your kid and granting them understanding about what's going on. So, um, I just don't see there being. I'm not setting my kid up for something bad to happen. Something bad can happen if things don't work out with me and my partner or a partner.
Well, you've
I am
described something
not.
that happened to your kid.
Yeah, what I'm saying is upon getting a
No, my
partner.
point is you've described something having already happened to your kid that was bad.
Well, I said that there were
Right?
negatives and positives when we stopped being together. And there was both negatives and positive. There was, yeah, it's a trade-off for the kid. There are some things that are gained and there's some things that are lost.
What's gained?
A reconfiguration of the previous role where that person in their interactions is just it's like, it's just, for my kid, it's just like, it's just me and her again. I don't see them as an extension of my parents.
So you had stability at point A prior to having a sexual relationship with this woman. Then you had a sudden change to the relationship between parent and or excuse me, not between parent, between this woman and your kid. And then another sudden change where it went back from point A to B to A.
Mm-hmm.
So the change from A to B to A, I think pretty clearly, if the goal is at least in part to have stability in the kid's life, is worse than staying at A throughout or staying at B
If
throughout.
my only goal was to make sure that everything was as stable as possible, sure, that's not my goal. I don't think that keeping any instability out of my kid's life is even a good thing. Part of preparing them for having their own freedom is not shielding them from everything bad that can ever possibly happen, and allowing them to experience some things that are not
Okay, but
great,
there's a lot of things
and
that you
being
would.
there as a
Mhm.
guide through those processes. And if
There's a
you
lot of things.
handle it correctly, this can end up being a positive thing on their life, albeit maybe not in the moment, but overall can be a very positive experience depending on how you approach it. I think when you're a parent, you kind of have to have the approach of like, you never let anything bad go to waste. When something bad happens to your kid, you should try to maximize that event's potential to help your kid
Sure,
grow.
but I don't think that you should be attempting to seek out.
I did not attempt. I did not seek out a partner in order to teach my kid a life lesson.
Right, but the issue that I think that is happening is that when you increase the number of partners, almost by definition, you increase the number of separations. And when kids have separation anxiety, as the overwhelming majority of kids do, that's difficult for kids.
Yeah, well, I think it's really important that if you're going to have somebody be uh, taking on a larger role with your kid, that there is an understanding that they're not out of your kid's life when you go. And I understand that's not how it works for most people, but thankfully, my vetting process has been pretty good, and which is why my
Hmm.
kid's still able to maintain that relationship. And it's also why I said in the beginning of this too. I think there's a lot of people. It kind of bothers me that we've started referring to polyamory as ethical non-monogamy, because everybody just says ethical non-monogamy when they're actually like a lot of people are pretty devoid of ethics when they say that.
Mhm.
I don't know if you're familiar with the term unicorn hunting, but there are people who will just like couples who will just try to find an additional partner
Birds.
to
Yep.
make them a very much second class person in the relationship and take
Yep.
full advantage of them. And they say that they're E&M. No, you're a fucking asshole, and you're making every other person who practices polyamory look like shit when you do. Those things really bother me. I think that having a relationship dynamic that is not typical to most people, so that there are not really well fleshed out ideas of what is good and what is bad for people. You need to be extra careful when you're setting up what it means to be ethical with each other to begin with. And I think that unfortunately a lot of people don't do that, and I don't advocate for that. But I think that when you take necessary steps to ensure that you're doing right by the people that are already in your life and the people that you are bringing into your life in kind, that you're not doing anything uh, directly harmful. You're just pursuing your own happiness and doing your best as any other parent would do who has their kid's best interest at heart while also trying to pursue uh, their own wants and needs.
Yeah. Um, hmm.
I think there's a lot of situations that you would condemn that I would also condemn in polyamory, which is why for a long time I wrote a blog trying to inspire and make connections with people to just try to promote better ideas within the polyamory community. Because at the end of the day, most people are selfish and shitty, right? They don't really think about other people. They just kind of do what they want because that's what they want. And I don't want to see that being a part of like end up being the face of the lifestyle that I live because it's already under enough scrutiny as it is.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to be clear. If you were talking about a stable partnership between three parents, I would have the same view on that as I have on gay marriage or gay partnership prior to it becoming uh, relatively accepted within society, which is that internal to the three people partnership, there's no reason that I see to expect that that's going to be uh, worse. Admittedly, it somewhat increases the chances of divorce. It somewhat increases the chances of those parents having inequality in love, or you don't like that, but sort of focus on one another. But broadly, I would not have condemnation for a group of three that was stable between the group of three. I think where I come
Does
to
the
that,
condemnation come up if they end up breaking up?
yeah, for sure,
Oh,
I would condemn. Yeah,
so
I
you're
would
only
condemn.
okay if it ends up working out in the end.
I would condemn any partners of who are responsible for children for not trying really fucking hard to make that partnership work, at least until that kid is an adult.
Well, I'd say that I don't think that you should be positioning yourself into a long-term relationship, period, if you're not trying really hard to make that relationship work. That just doesn't make any fucking sense to me. Just keep it short term. If you're not going to do that, just treat it
Right.
as a
And so
short-term relationship.
my point is that I oppose the idea of short-term relationships when there are children involved.
Yeah. I don't advocate for involving your children or having these people around your children if you don't intend for them to be long term. But I'm definitely not consequentialist about it. Uh, if you tried your best and failed, shit, you tried your best and you failed.
But you're increasing the opportunity for failure when you're engaging in with a lot of people.
Um, I don't. What do you think? Yeah, I guess this is just so weird to me. So I'll say the majority of the relationships that I have had, polyamorous relationships I've had, have been triad relationships. Which
Mm-hmm.
would be what you're talking about. When they've been intended to be long term, I have my kid has met them, and when they haven't, my kid hasn't met them. Or if they did meet them, it was just like this is our friend, and we acted as friends around. Like we didn't do anything that would have been like overtly romantic. So it would have been the same as just having a regular friend over. Um, but I don't think that like maybe if you're talking about somebody having like I think that you probably don't need to get super extravagant with the number of people around your kid. Um, just because I don't think that you should have like a ton of adults around your kid to begin with. There's probably some degree of like limiting the access that the number of adults that have close access to your child in general is just because and I'm not even talking about people like doing the worst things, but I just think that you're introducing the opportunity for people to have like a lot of extra time to influence your kid that's outside of your control. Um, so like I mean, if you have like 5, 6 partners, I think it's probably going to be pretty hard to convince me that all 5 or 6 of them you properly vetted to be around your kid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I don't think that like maybe if we're out that far, I could see some potential issues raising. I mean, I'd certainly be willing to listen to the justifications and all that before I made like a hardline determination. However, I don't think that there is anything inherently bad about this, and I think that you've even given me enough to say that I don't think that you think there's anything inherently wrong with it. It's just that you are worried about risks, and I don't think as a parent.
I think that there's something inherently bad about any form of family system that is uh, not long term during the time of children's development.
That's out of our
That's a problem.
control. That is always out of the
It's
parents'
it's
control.
not no, it's not fully out of the control of the parents. There are things that parents can do that can increase the chances of something lasting long term, and there are things that parents can do that decrease the chances of it lasting long term. For example, cheating right? Which I assume you're opposed to as well. Cheating
Oh
is
yeah.
bad, right? Cheating is super bad because because it increases the chances of otherwise stable partnerships becoming no longer stable, and that is really bad for kids. And I would say that cheating writ large is a problem, but that cheating when there are children involved in the relationship is orders of magnitude worse than cheating simply when you are an adult and there's another adult and there are no kids involved. And I would say that when you make decisions that increase the chances of instability for the kid, that those are decisions that I think that we should condemn culturally. So that's why I think it is good to condemn culturally cheating on your spouse. It's why I think it's important to condemn culturally trading in a partner for a younger, newer model, right? It's why I think it's because like there are a lot of wealthy people, wealthy men specifically, who will get to their midlife crisis when their kids are 12 and be like, I don't really,
It's just the
my
phrasing of the
wife is a
newer
little
model.
ugly. But like that's literally what I think it is in a lot of ways.
Well,
And I think that that's something that should be condemned. Those guys are pieces of shit. They shouldn't be doing that.
my ex-wife was 17 years older than me, and my current wife is younger than I am. That's why I laughed. It wasn't like that, but it's just funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
some people do that. Yeah, because they just want something that they find more preferable to look at and fuck.
Yeah.
And I think that that's probably just a bad way to go about finding a relationship in general for you.
hmm
And I really do think that I really think that you undervalue a parent's duty to be living a happy life for themselves in order to maintain being a good parent. Because you can talk about how much agency and freedom people have to make decisions, but if you're miserable, you're going to not be able to be a very good parent. At least not to the
Yeah,
degree to where you were if you're not miserable.
I agree with you. I don't think that uh
Like, have you ever found out that somebody's terrible parent just actually had like severe depression, and you're like, oh shit? Or have somebody ever been like, I always thought my mom was a real piece of shit. It just turns out that like she was fucking miserable. My dad was terrible. I didn't even know. I always really liked my dad because he was great to me, but my mom, I just always thought she just fucking shitty parent. I had no idea everything she was going through. Maybe you haven't experienced any friends that
yeah,
had that.
of course I've experienced that. I'm
Yeah.
not advocating that people stay with abusive partners.
Well, what I'm
I'm
saying
saying
here is that I think that you have that there is a demand for you to not suppress things that are super important to you in your life. I think in it
I just don't
romantically is pretty
I
important as
don't
well.
I don't buy the idea that like um how do I phrase this? I don't believe that it's that an active uh and complicated sex life is required
Oh,
uh for a person's happiness.
I don't. I would never ever frame polyamory as being something that's about your sex life.
Well, how would you describe it?
Um, so I would say that it can be that, but generally speaking, we just like refer to these as like open relationships. Polyamory is kind of like a bastardized word. It's like Greek and Latin put together. It just means many loves. So for me, and I think that the people that are going to approach it in an ethical way, it's about um, having romantic relationships. And when I say romantic, it's not a
Okay.
substitution
I
for
don't think that it's
sexual.
Yeah, I don't think that it's necessary to have complicated uh romantic partnerships in order to have a fulfilling life.
I don't either. I think most people are perfectly fine with that without that. But I think that if it is important to you and you not doing it, um, is bad. if it's important to you. I think it's just as bad as telling somebody who
I have a question.
who only believes in
I
monogamy and saying you have to be polyamorous.
Yeah, I have a question. Let's
Yeah.
propose that there's a person who works really, really hard and takes very seriously their job, and they
Yeah.
do work 75, 80 hours a week. Um, Now they have an infant. Do you think that it's reasonable to tell them that they should stop working 75 hours a week?
Yeah, maybe. It depends on.
What if it's really like important to them and they really cherish the work that they do?
It would depend on obviously things that can't be known, but it would depend on how it will affect them and if they can balance that out or not. Can you really work 70, 80 hours a week? So I would say that to make this equivalent, if you have so many partners to where you just don't have time for your kid, fuck off.
But it's not just a time for the kid, right?
Well,
Because like
that's where the
when
work
you're
comes
working,
in, right?
no, when you're working 75, 80 hours a week, it's not just a matter of the time that you're at work. It's a matter of you're always on call. It's a matter of
That's an extension
there's
of
an
time.
understanding. There's an understanding of uh, what is number one and what is number two, and the kid will. And I know a lot of kids, myself included, who grew up with at least one parent um, who did work 75, 80 hours a week, and were on call all the time. Uh, the kid understands themselves as being second to the work. And even if the work is fulfilling for the parent, it's not really relevant. I think that it is morally condemnable as a parent to work 75, 80 hours a week until your kid is 18.
Sure. I can very much understand how that is likely to happen. I don't think, however, that it's impossible for somebody to work that much and still be a good parent. I just think that
Right,
it
but
makes the
there, and
challenges and
again,
responsibilities. It presents certain
I don't
challenges and
think,
responsibilities that are unique to that situation, and that if you're
right.
not really dutiful, you're gonna fuck up.
I don't think that it's impossible to be a good parent and be a single parent household, right? But it's something that is an increased probability of something bad happening. And so if you have an ability to choose between being not a single parent household and being a single parent household, you must, as a parent, choose not to be a single parent household. If you have a choice between being a household where you work 75 hours a week or not being a household where you work 75 hours a week, you must choose not to work 75 hours a week.
No, not in all situations.
Earlier, you were saying that you were a deontologist. You were saying that once you recognize that something is worse or better, feel that you have an obligation to at least try to do the thing that is better.
Mhm.
So if you grant that it is better for kids to have a parent who works 40 hours a week than to have a parent who works 75 hours a week.
So I don't have a rule about how much. See, I am a dentist, but I have a rule about the hours that you work in regards to a kid. What I would have a rule about is how much time and effort you're putting towards your kid.
Right, but the problem is that there is a structural impediment as a result of being a single parent household. There's a structural impairment as a result of working 75 hours a week.
Yeah.
And those structural impairments are things that you should try to avoid.
Um. I like. Well, I do think it would probably end up meeting my criteria for ending up being something bad. Um. But I don't know because, like I said, for me, the imperative here would be to be meeting the requirements necessary for your kid. And I think that's going to be pretty fucking challenging if you work 70, 80 hours a week.
Right. I think it's pretty challenging to meet the needs of a kid if your uh,
emotional focus is shifting between multiple partners. And I think that it's difficult for a kid if the people who are in their lives is shifting as well. And so it's better to have semi-permanent relationships with tertiary parental roles. It's better still for them to simply have stability.
I've been meaning to ask this too. When you say child, what age range are we talking about here?
I think the importance decreases over time, obviously, right? I think that obviously, like when you're very, very young, this is really important. It becomes less and less important as the kid grows. But yeah, I would say that until a kid goes off to college or leaves the household in whatever capacity they do.
Okay, so we're still talking teenagers here.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But again, teenagers to a lesser degree than young kids. But yes, I would include teenagers.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I would say like the whole working thing. The older children get, the less they need their parent. Unless you're fucking up. If they need you as much as if they need you just as much when they're 15 as they do when they're 7, you've really done something wrong.
Sure.
Yeah.
So in terms of so for all of these things, it matters less when you're a teenager than when you're very young. But I think that even at the time of high school, my dad didn't go to any of my basketball games growing up. I sucked at basketball, but my dad didn't go to any of those games.
Wait,
right?
did he not go because you sucked? Is that what you're implying?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay.
Because I'm saying like he didn't go because his focus was on work.
Okay, I'm sorry for laughing. I'm glad that's not
no, you're
what
totally
you meant.
fine. You're totally fine. But like, it's important for kids to have their parents come to their sporting events. It's important for kids to have their parents come to their theater, whatever the thing is that the kid is doing. It's relevant that those parents come to those things. It's relevant that the parents be there when they get home from school. All of those things.
And in fact, myself, my wife, and our ex were present at my kid's choir. And I played baseball, and my mom went to one game. And she ran on the field when I got hit by a fucking ball. So I just wish she didn't fucking go. And then she never went to any others again. So I see both sides of that. When I was in sports, I played baseball and tennis. Nobody ever showed up to any of my games. And I wasn't very good, and I was very good at getting hit by the fucking ball because nobody knows how to pitch in high school. So I got on base every single time I went to bat. I either got hit or I hit that fucking ball, and there was nobody there to see it. So I make sure that when my kid has events, they go, and I don't think that there was anything bad the fact that my kid had 3 people present for their choir rather than 2 people. And I know that in the future, if that person's free, that they're very likely to show up for other future choir events, even though that we're not romantically involved with them. And then this is the kind of thing that good vetting does. I just think that it would be a lot better, instead of condemning the entire practice of polyamory, if you just kind of like if you could just talk about the pitfalls and dangers. I talk about the pitfalls and dangers.
Yeah, what I don't understand is you seem to be comfortable condemning categorically the idea of single-parent households. You feel comfortable categorically.
No, I wouldn't condemn the single parent at all. I would just say that it's worse.
No, I didn't say the single parent. I said single parenthood, right? But you're willing to condemn that as a structure. You'd be willing to condemn as a structure alcoholic parents. You'd be willing to condemn as a structure, right? Cocaine addicts, whatever it might be, parents who work for 80 hours a
cocaine addicts
week.
Might be okay, but probably not.
Yeah,
they'd be getting a lot of fucking one-on-one time talking with dad. I can tell you that.
Yeah. But yeah, so you'd be willing to condemn all of those things because there are, I mean, obviously, not every single person who's an alcoholic abuses their kid, at least in a physical sense,
Right.
right? But
I'm
you
sorry, your
shouldn't be an
smile when I
alcoholic.
said that. This man's done some blow before, I know.
No, I would never. I'm a very good boy. Um,
Yeah.
um, but uh,
Yeah, I understand. Being
yeah.
being a shitty person doesn't always translate out to being a shitty parent. Um,
Well, I don't think, to be clear, I don't think that alcoholics are shitty people. Some of them
uh,
are,
I think
but not all
that
of them.
more often than not, I would say you're probably doing some really shitty things to the people around you. Yeah, I shouldn't say
Oh,
shitty person because I think the bar is pretty high for being a bad person rather than a person of bad circumstances. Uh, but um, yeah, I just think that so I don't think that I think that saying polyamory as a parent is just a bad practice is not good. I think that saying that if you're going to be polyamorous and you have a kid,
that's what I
you
don't
have a
understand.
lot
I
of
don't understand.
additional responsibilities that you need to be very aware of.
Okay, but like, you don't say
The
if
other
you're going to be a
things,
parent.
everything else you listed in and of itself would be seen as
Yeah,
a negative without children.
no, working 75 hours a week without children is not a negative.
Oh, I think it
I
is.
don't agree with that.
That's
I
why I
don't
would
agree with
that's
that.
that's why I would say it the
I don't
same.
think that I don't think that being single without kids is a negative. I don't think it's a negative without context to, right? Like, and I don't think that polyamory without kids is a negative, right? I think that there's lots of behaviors that are perfectly appropriate for adults. I don't think that it's a negative if you're living alone with just an adult partner to walk around your household naked all the time, right? If you have a kid, it's very different, right? There's lots of things that adults can do that I think are perfectly acceptable when you're just amongst adults that are not acceptable in front of kids.
I might be a little further away from the walking around your house naked when I knew somebody, the woman who was just like always regularly naked around their house from the time their kid was an infant, and their kids seemed to turn out just fine. They just didn't believe in like it's basically like a nudist ideology, I guess. Didn't seem like it fucked the kid up at all. I wouldn't do it, but I don't know if it's inherently bad.
I don't want to get sidetracked with that conversation. I disagree with you, but I don't want to get sidetracked with
Sure,
it.
I just
But the point is that there's lots of things that you can do as an adult that are fine as an adult, but aren't fine if you're doing it in front of kids.
sure, yeah. Um, that this is obviously true. As an adult, you can have sex in your living room, and you can't do that if you have a kid. Sure, I get it.
Yes.
However, these things, I think the things that you're talking about lead to direct harm to the kid, and I don't think that consequentially a relationship not panning out is you directly harming your kid.
Single parent households are not direct harm, they're indirect harm.
No, polyamory. It seems like you're saying that
Right,
this
that's
is
what I'm saying. Single parent household is not direct harm. Polyamory is not direct harm either, but you're willing to condemn single parent households as a concept, even if you're not willing to condemn the parents themselves. I'm not saying that
I don't
you
even know if I'm
should be
condemning it. I just said
condemned.
that it's statistically worse.
Yeah.
But I don't I think most of the times
So you have a
people
preference for a single
don't
Okay.
have
You have a preference. You have a preference for dual parent households over single parent households.
I think that it is just statistically better. But I don't think
So
that
you
you've done
have a
anything
preference for it.
wrong if you are a single
I didn't
parent.
say that. I didn't say that the people are bad people, but I said that you have a preference for dual parent households, and where possible, people should strive to be a dual parent household over being a single parent household.
Um Not just for the sake of being a dual parent household, no. You should strive if you have one, you should strive to keep it if it's a good relationship. If it's a bad relationship, you shouldn't strive to keep it. I don't think that the data would say that if you're in a bad marriage, that it's better for the kid to stay in that marriage.
I don't know what you mean by bad.
Both people are unhappy with the relationship.
Both people are unhappy with the relationship. I
Yeah.
think that there is a higher level of obligation to make it work when you have a kid than when you don't have a kid. If you simply are just like, you know what, after 2 years being with this person, let's just go our separate ways and like rock on. I think that's perfectly appropriate unless there's a kid. If there's a kid, I think you have an obligation to go to therapy. Again, presuming that there's no like physical violence going on, any of that shit. But like, barring anything that's like genuinely abusive, if you're just drifting apart, I think that you have an obligation to go to therapy, an obligation to try as hard as you can to make it work. And that is not the case of relationships that don't have kids.
I just think it's statistically better. I don't know how much effort I would insist you putting on making an unhappy marriage work. I would say some, but I think that you probably would demand a higher level of participation in trying to salvage what I would consider to be like a failed marriage.
Even though you understand the outcomes for your kid as being significantly harmed if you fail to make it work.
Yeah, I also understand the harms to my kid if I am the longer that I'm staying in it trying to make it work as well, if it's going to ultimately fail. I think if it's ultimately going to fail, you would have been better off cutting
Right,
it off sooner than later.
but you should be attempting as hard as you possibly can to make it work.
I think it has a lot to do with whether you feel like it can be salvaged or not. If you don't feel like it can be salvaged, then
Right.
you're just risking
And if you think
exposing
that
your
there's
kid to a bad relationship.
and if you think that it's possible to be salvaged, you have an obligation to work as hard as you possibly can to make it work.
Sure, but I also would say the same if you're in a relationship without a kid too. If you think it can work and
No,
it's a long-term relationship, you should be trying to make it work.
right, but there's a higher degree of obligation if there's a kid involved.
I already think that there's a high degree. I don't know how much more I put on that.
But is there a higher degree?
I don't know. I think it just depends
I
on
don't. I really. I
context.
dislike that as an answer. I think that is a bad answer
I just
because I think if you understand that the kid is going to be worse off if you fail to do this thing,
it's not
and you don't
guaranteed. Your kid
recognize
could be
that
worse
as
off
being
if you
something.
stay trying longer.
No, okay. You understand that there is this bad thing that will happen to the kid if the kid doesn't have a two-parent household, and
And
you're
there's
not
also a
willing
bad
to
thing that will
fight
happen to the
harder
kid.
for that, and you're not willing to fight harder for that than if there was no kid involved, I really dislike that
This
answer.
isn't black and white. If you stay in a bad relationship, every day that you're in it, it's negatively affecting your kid as well. So all of those days that you're working trying to fix it is also negatively impacting your kid. And if it ends up failing, all that time that you spent trying to make it work was ultimately unnecessary harm done to your kid when you could have cut it off sooner. That's why I can't say it just across the board, yes, this is the correct answer.
That is a yeah, I think that that's a bad answer.
Yeah, well, I think that for myself and other people, I wish my parents
Yeah,
would have separated sooner rather than later. I think that I would have been a lot better off if they didn't try working through it because it fucking sucked. If you're around your parents every single day, not being able to get along and agree on anything, and they're always fighting and shit, I think that's way worse than just having it cut
right.
off right then.
I think that parents have an obligation to try to uh, if they're going to argue in front of their kids, model good argumentation. And if they're not capable of arguing well in front of their kids, they should attempt not to argue in front of their kids, at least for that period of
Even if
time.
you don't
But
argue in
long
front of
term, it's
them,
a lot
the
better.
effects of the argument are still getting brought into the
I
house.
I get that. I get that. But I think that uh, it's writ large, uh, massively more important to maintain certain relationships than to maintain others. And writ large, it is massively more important to maintain a relationship between two parents that have a kid than to maintain a relationship void the child.
I guess I don't believe in staying together just for it. I think that leads to bad outcomes. I think if your child doesn't see you and your partner in a loving relationship, this is fucking bad.
Right. But I think that you should be trying to build and maintain a loving relationship with your partner, and that is more important than if there isn't a kid.
Yeah, so I'm gonna say that if you're in a bad and unloving relationship, you should either be trying to fix it or get out of it as soon as possible, regardless of the situation.
Right. But if I
And so I'm saying that because that's the
if I'm
case, it's the same as when
I
there's a kid.
if I don't like an individual conversation that I have with a person on a first date, I can just not have a second date, and there are no moral repercussions from that. However, if I am a parent of a small child and I don't like an individual conversation I had with my spouse, obviously there is a larger pressure, and ought to be a larger pressure, to figure it out, to talk through it, to be adults, and to make it work.
Okay, so I never said anything about how you should be date. Where I this whole
Right.
context we've been
I'm
talking
going
about
to the
established
extreme.
relationships.
That's my point.
Sure,
I'm going to the extreme
but
to prove the point that there is a difference in degree, and I think that kids being involved in a relationship is a difference not even in degree but in kind from a relationship that doesn't have kids.
there is a difference in degree in relationships, period, once we cross certain thresholds. Once you are in a serious and committed relationship, I think that it is bad to you either need to once you recognize it, it either needs to be getting worked on actively or you need to end it. That's a decision that has to be made. If you are incapable of, for one reason or another, on actively improving it, you need to end it because it's bad for all parties involved. If there's a kid involved, for the same reasons, you need to either be actively working to improve it or end it as soon as possible because it's worse for all parties involved. Like I said, I'm a deontologist. I'm not a utilitarian here. I'm not weighing things. That I'm not like comparing. Like I'm not jotting down numbers. If it's bad, it's bad. If it's good, it's good. You do the thing that's good. So all it really comes down to for me is, if you're in a bad situation, you need to either get out or make it better. Stop being in bad situation. It doesn't make it more or less bad because there's a
Okay,
kid. It's
let me
just
ask you
as
a
much
question.
bad for the same reasons, but you're also affecting another person.
If I heard a friend say, "Hey, I went on a date over the weekend, and you know, it was a little boring. I was just sort of like, eh." So I called it off and I decided that we're done. I would not bat an eye. I would be like, yeah, that seems perfectly fine, reasonable, right? It was a
Yep.
first date. Who gives a shit?
Yeah, but
If
this is
someone told me that, oh yeah, I just like dinner. There was just no like we tried to have sex on Thursday. Me and my wife with and we have two kids or whatever, and I had sex with my wife, and it was just like it was like fine.
these two things aren't comparable in the least because the what the thing is wholly different when you say my wife and I went on a date. When you are on a date, you are not in a relationship with somebody. So we're talking about a totally different
Right,
dynamic.
fine.
And I would even
I,
say that if you're just dating somebody casually and you're in a long-term
right.
committed relationship, what becomes right or wrong here are totally different things because
So
they
the
are wholly
question
different
is,
situations.
so you're willing to recognize that there is a difference in kind between first date and committed relationship of 6 months.
Yes, because the
You're
duties
willing
here are
to grant,
different.
sure, you're willing to grant that there's a difference in kind between committed relationships of 6 months versus married. You're willing to recognize that there's a difference in kind between married and married with kids.
Yep.
Okay. So if there are certain behaviors that are appropriate um, at one of those layers,
Yep.
but not at a higher of those layers, why are you not willing to say that there's a difference between the
Because the answer
obligation
is
to
the
protect the
exact
relationship.
same.
No, it's not. You
Yes, it
just
is.
granted. No, you
No,
just
no.
granted.
Because
Hold up,
okay,
hold up,
wait, you're
hold up,
talking
hold
about
up, hold up,
layers
hold up,
of
hold
this
up.
being the same
You just
thing.
hold up, hold up, hold up. You just granted that the statement, it was like fine but not great, is a perfectly reasonable reason to cut off and end a relationship
Not a
that is
relationship.
a first date. Fine, fine. 6 months. After 6 months, I say the spark just isn't there anymore. So we called it off, right? We're both, neither of us did anything wrong. Totally fine. Just we were dating for 6 months. The spark's not there anymore. We called it off. That's totally valid.
I would say that's not a
If
committed
someone's
relationship then.
6 months,
I'm saying that if you are able to say, it's not there anymore, then it wasn't a committed relationship. Being committed means that you're not going to leave because you're bored. That's what the commitment is. Otherwise, I
okay.
don't know what commitment means.
Okay, so commitment means that you aren't going to leave because you're bored. You're not going to
Yeah, that's
leave
like the
because you
bottom
have an individual
threshold.
conversation that is like not great. I think that you have an obligation that supersedes the obligation of a person who is not married if you are married. I think of an obligation that supersedes a person who does not have kids if you do have kids.
Okay, so to me, the reason why it's not different is because if you have an agreement, a committed relationship, there is a duty to perform certain actions, and if you're not actively able to make it any better, I would say it is your imperative to leave. The same as if you are married, the same as if you have a kid. These are all the same thing once there is equivalent duties, which is the duty is we have agreed to be together. And with the kid being there, I would say the duty is increased to make these same exact decisions.
Cool.
So
So
nothing
you're
changes
willing to,
here.
okay, but there's a difference in kind, right? It's not like your obligation is orders of magnitude more real
See, that's the thing.
than if you didn't have a kid.
This is the thing, though. For me, if something is right, it's not more right or more wrong at any given point. Right is right and wrong is wrong for me. It's
That's not
always right
true.
and it's
You don't
always
believe
wrong.
that. That's not true. There's a difference between, sexual assault and rape. Right? Both of them are wrong, but they're not the same. There's a difference
I said
between
if it's wrong, it is
stealing
wrong.
someone's sandwich and stealing someone's computer.
That's not what I mean. I'm saying that you should always do what is right and you should never do what is wrong.
Okay, fine, but you can grant that there are different degrees of wrong and different degrees of right.
Let me think about this. There's different degrees of right and there's different degrees of wrong. I think there's just more or less harm. That's it. Right is right and wrong is wrong. There's more harm and there's
Okay,
less
so there's
harm.
more. Fine, we can use harm. That's fine. There's more harm in the end of a relationship if the relationship includes kids than if there is an end of a relationship that does not include kids.
Yeah, you'd be causing more harm, but the correct answer is still the same.
Okay, do you think there's any harm from the first date perspective? Is there any harm for me
No,
just
there's no
being like,
duties there. You have no duty to the other person.
you have no duties at all?
You have no duties to follow up with another date. That's how dating
Okay.
works.
You have no duties to follow up with another date, but you do
You
have
keep talking.
duties.
I'm just gonna fill up my water glass. Okay. I got my headphones.
Yeah. You're totally fine. So there's no duty to continue the relationship, but you do have certain duties. So for example, one of the duties that you'd have for a first date is you shouldn't run away and leave them with a check. You shouldn't invite someone else to the date that they didn't expect to be there. You shouldn't. There are obligations that you have even on a first date. You should ensure that they're physically safe. All of those kinds of things. Okay. So I would say
when I said there's no duty there, I mean there was no duty to follow up with another date because that was a
Yeah,
specific
yeah.
scenario. Sure,
Totally
there's
understand.
other duties that you have just to
There's
other
other
people.
duties that do exist. Yeah.
Yeah, because you
But there's
there's
no,
inherent agreements when you go on a date that you're making, which is that like yeah, like I'm not gonna show up and fuck you up, you know. Just
yeah, and
there's
even
just
beyond that, like, I'm not going to show up and I'm not going to walk over to a different table because I think there's another girl who's hotter, right? That's the thing that I'm not going to do. There are obligations that come with it. And
what a fucking Giga Chad move. Could you imagine? Could you imagine
yeah,
how bad you'd feel if you're on a date with somebody and she just sees some dude sitting alone? She's like,
it's like, I'm really sorry, but he's hotter than you. I'm going to walk over there. Yeah.
and you look
That's not,
over, you're like, what the fuck? Oh God, no, she's right. I'd have done the same thing.
yeah. And so there are some degrees of obligations, and even in that first, that first date, like if you're getting into a conversation and the conversation is going, marginally south, not terribly, oh my God, one of you is a monster type of south, but like marginally south, you have an obligation to try to salvage the conversation. You don't have an obligation to try to salvage the
Oh,
relationship because there is none.
no, I don't think
No?
so. No, absolutely not. I think that if it's going really badly, like I think you're all right to just have fun with it going badly. This is just a person that you don't have any duty to. You have no agreements to have a good time. The hope is to have a good time, but there's no explicit agreement that we're both gonna enjoy ourselves tonight. There's a hope, and if you do,
So
that's
you
how you
think
can
that it's
find out
okay
friendship
to
and dating.
you think it's okay to like recognize, oh, this is a person who is uncomfortable for X, Y, and Z reason, whatever it might be. Not because you're doing anything morally wrong, but just because you are grading on them personally, and you think it's okay to continue to be grading on them personally.
I don't think you owe them a change in your behavior. I would say they owe it to themselves to set up a boundary, and if you don't follow through with it, then get up and fucking leave you there.
Let's propose that you're on a date with a person, and the person, what's a good example? Because I'm trying to think of something that's not like morally wrong to do, but it's just like grading.
Well, yeah, I did say I'm a deontologist, so I'd say if you're doing something that's not morally wrong, I don't care. And like I'm actually pretty big for
I
that.
don't
Like
believe you.
I think it's
Yeah.
okay to uh do things that I wouldn't do. I think that you have every right in the whole world uh to express yourself in a way that people are going to find as you being an asshole and stuff. I don't think you owe that to anybody.
Okay.
I like being nice and kind to people, so I typically
Yeah.
go that way. But I'm
Yeah.
not going to say that you're wrong if you're not. I don't think you owe it to the world to be pleasant.
You don't owe it to the world to be pleasant.
Yeah. If you don't feel like being
Mm.
pleasant, why the fuck should you have to suffer instead of being just you? I think that
Do you owe it to your kid to be pleasant?
to be pleasant,
Yeah.
not all the time, no. God,
Do you
in
owe it to
fact,
your kid to
I owe it to
try
my
to be
kid to not always. I owe it to my kid to not always be. I
fine? Do
so
you owe
one
it
of
to
the
your kid
things that I think
to
is most
try to be
important,
pleasant?
um, I don't know. I choose to, but here's the thing. I think that it
I'm
is
asking, do
extremely.
you owe it to your kid to try as best you can to be relatively pleasant in your day-to-day interactions with your kid? The answer seems to be yes, right?
I think I owe it to my kid to not be intentionally unpleasant.
Okay. Do you
The
owe it to your
relationship that I
first
have,
date? Do you owe it to your first date not to try to be unpleasant?
no,
Why not?
because I don't have a duty to this person. To not
Wait,
do
hold
that.
up. Hold. You don't have a duty to this person? You absolutely have duties to this person.
To not be
You have-
unpleasant, I said.
Oh, okay. But you have duties to this person. There are duties that you owe to everyone, even if
I
you're
was
not
gonna
on that
say
date.
I owe the person I'm on a date with just as much as I would owe any other stranger.
Well, so that's not quite true. You don't owe Like you owe your date to make sure that they get safely home, for example. You
Not
don't owe it to,
necessarily.
yes, necessarily.
No. What the
Absolutely
fuck are you talking
necessarily.
about? I go on a
You
date with
text them the,
somebody. I go on a date with somebody, and they get we go our separate ways. I have to make sure somehow that they get home safely. Are you kidding me?
no, you just, I think you have an obligation to like text them and be like, hey, you got home safe? Question mark.
I think it's good to do that, and I usually do.
No, you have an obligation to do that. That is absolutely
Why?
something you have an obligation to do. If you're leaving a bar at 2 a.m. with a person, you don't feel like you have an obligation to, particularly if it's a petite woman, make sure that she's getting home safe? Really?
Yeah, I think it's good to. Like it's pleasant. I would, but I don't think you have to do that.
Huh.
Why would you have to do that?
Because they are only out there because of the time that they allotted to be with you, and they are putting themselves in some degree of physical risk in order to be able to spend that time with you. And I think that therefore you have obligations to ensure that they are comfortable, both physically and emotionally, on their way home. I'm not saying you have to drive them home, but I am saying that you need to make sure that
No,
they're okay.
it's their responsibility to make sure that they get home safe. Now, I don't think you should do anything to decrease their chances of it. I do think that it's really nice to, and I probably would, especially if they've been drinking. I'm probably going to take some extra.
Yeah,
What I
this
would
is a bad
do,
answer.
what I would do, and what
Yeah,
you're obligated to do are totally different, though.
I thought you were a deontologist. I thought those were the same thing.
Uh, no, there's a lot of things like not everything that I do is an imperative. There's
Okay.
lots of things I can do where it's just what I feel like because there's no imperative. I'm only required to act according to an imperative. Otherwise, I have free
Okay.
reign to do whatever I
Someone,
want.
yeah, someone comes up to your date while you're sitting there at the table, and calls them. I don't know what words we're allowed to say, but some mean slur towards women, um, and starts yelling at them. Right? You're sitting at this table. You barely know this woman.
Yeah.
But do you feel like you have a higher degree of obligation to defend her in that situation than you have an obligation to defend some random person sitting at a different table?
No, and I think I would defend both. And I have defended people in
Oh, good
public where
lord.
people are being shitty. You're not obligated to do that. Are you kidding me?
Good lord. This is. I gotta miss. It's gonna be hard
As
for
a
me to be able.
deontologist, I'm actually
It's
shocked to
gonna be
see
hard for
somebody
me to
who
be able to
feels.
convince you of something like polyamory when there are things that are much more obvious to me that you're not willing to grant.
It blows my mind. Like I said, I'm a deontologist, and you have such a higher degree of duty than I do. I think it's insane. Now, here's the thing, though. Like, I would, because I would be uncomfortable not doing it. So I'm just doing it to appease
Right, you're
myself.
just doing it for shits and giggles.
No,
Yeah.
not for shits and giggles. When I see somebody who's distressed, I usually try to reach out to them. Well, I see people being shitty to strangers, like in the grocery store, and I say something because fuck that person. Uh, but that's just because of like who I am as a person. I'm not obligated to do that. For all I know, this person might get pissed off and beat my ass. So I'm not obligated to put myself in that kind of harm. Do I think it's likely? No, but that's the thing, I don't know, and I'm not obligated to incur any kind of risks like that just because a random event is happening around me. I generally choose to, though.
Hmm.
But if I'm feeling particularly anxious that day, I might be like, "Fuck, I'm avoiding this whole situation in front of me. I'm just not mentally prepared to deal with this. I didn't do anything wrong." However, if I would say that if somebody is about to physically strike
Yeah,
somebody and I
yeah.
can do something about it, I probably have more of an obligation there. I'd have to see the consequence, like see the shit laid out in front of me.
Okay,
Uh,
so you have no obligation to your first date,
no more
um,
than I do any
to
other
protect them,
stranger.
but you do have an obligation to protect your 10th date with this person. In that situation, you have an obligation?
I'm assuming that at this point we have some sort of implicit or explicit agreements about Like if you say like I'm your,
Implicitly,
if like
yeah, I'll
even if you
answer.
don't call each other
Implicitly,
your boyfriend and girlfriend, if you feel like it is, like if you feel like you're in a relationship, then yeah, there's going to be some
it's been 10
implied,
days.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's going to be some
Implicitly, it's
level
been
of
10 days.
implied understanding of the structure that exists between the two of you, unless they say like, hey, I'm not comfortable with you like fighting any battles for me or anything like that. Which case I would say, yeah, you probably do have some responsibility to this person because you know, and you're not correcting the fact that they are going to rely on you for that. And if you're not comfortable doing that, you need to say it. And if you do tell them that and they agree to keep dating you, then you don't have that responsibility. But if it's implied on you and you're not doing anything to correct that, then yeah, you do have some
Okay.
responsibility.
You have some degree of a responsibility to protect a
Oh
person who
shit!
you intend to
I didn't go past your
with.
time, did I?
No, you're totally fine. I'm fine until 7. You're fine.
Oh, okay.
Um, uh, okay, so you're okay with that as an obligation by the 10th date, but you'd have more of an obligation to your kid than to your 10th date, right?
Yeah, there's
You'd
a
have
whole
more
slew of duties
obligation,
that go along with being a parent.
and you'd have more obligation to your wife than to this 10th date.
Yeah, there's certain duties that come along with being married to somebody. Is
Okay,
absolutely.
so there are some obligations that you have to the world writ large. You have some obligations that you have to people along this spectrum of becoming closer and closer to you. And the highest level possible to get to is that this is a person that you are married to, and this is a person who you have kids with.
Barring some
That's the
insane
highest level.
circumstances, yeah.
Okay.
And
And
obviously, there's some like super goofy shit we could create where you'd have a greater responsibility, but like
yeah,
in
fine.
normal,
But
regular, everyday
broadly
life,
speaking,
yes.
sure. Yeah. Then I would say that obligation um, means that you have an obligation to try to protect that relationship more intensely.
Um, I'm really not even trying to be pedantic, but like it just, I'm not entirely sure what you mean. I would
Yeah,
say if
like
you have to protect the
when I
relationship, you
was in
have to
high
protect the
school,
relationship.
sure. When I was in high school, my older sister and I just didn't click. She didn't do anything wrong to me. I didn't do anything wrong to her. We just didn't click, right? We weren't particularly like if she wasn't my sister, we wouldn't have been friends. But we have both worked diligently to build back up a real relationship that we both take quite seriously. And the reason for that is because she is my sister, right? The reason for that is because there's a higher level of obligation. And even if we wouldn't otherwise be
Mm,
friends, she's my sister. And so we have obligations to each other.
I don't agree with that. I don't. I don't
That's
see. I don't see.
crazy.
Genuinely, yeah.
Yeah.
I do not. So the reason why we think we have we have obligations to non-paternal family members, non-parental family members, or like children, is out of tradition. There's really no reason other than that, unless you're living together, that you have any obligation to do anything for them. This is just a traditional thing, and there's nothing
Because there's a
that I.
utility. There's
Yeah,
a
I'm not a
utility to
you.
the
I.
stability.
I.
There's a utility to have. I know you're not a utilitarian, that's fine. But if there is a value that can be provided to both of your lives and to the lives of your not yet born but eventually children, and can be provided to all of these different things, if there's a value
You're explaining
to
to me
having
utilitarianism right now. You're explaining to me the
no, I'm
utility
not.
to many
I'm
different
describing
people is
no,
what
I'm
makes it.
not. No, I'm describing to you why certain relationships matter.
I don't think that family, as in somebody who is blood related to you, has any intrinsic value that should be held more special than
Why is your kid
we
valuable?
we already talked about this in the beginning. That there's a multitude of reasons. Some of them are biological, and some of them are unique and personal.
Okay, so
And
I
I would say
I
overarching
reject
all of that,
biological. I want to clarify.
overarching all of those
reject,
though would be the fact
I
that
would,
they are solely dependent on you to provide them with things that nobody else can.
okay. I reject categorically the biological component there. I think that very quickly gets into some very bad views on adoption. But broadly, I agree with the idea that they are reliant on you, and beyond the reliance on you in terms of like they literally need you to survive. Even once the kid is 14, 15, 20, and no longer,
Well, you're still able to provide them things with something nobody else can that they need.
And what is the thing that you can provide to a 20-year-old that no one else can as a parent?
You can provide them with support, guidance, love, and care that has a more impactful and meaningful than anyone else can provide because of
And
your previous status of relationship with them when you were their sole source of everything.
Okay, so it's as a result of your previous status,
Yeah.
not as a result of your being a parent. So
Well,
let's
that you
propose,
being a parent is that status though. When they're a child and
so
growing up
let's
and being a teenager and they've relied on you and leaned on you and
yeah,
learned that you are a
so
person that they can, trust and
yeah. So let's
all that
propose
shit.
that you were in jail,
Yep.
or you were working overseas, whatever it might have been, for the majority of your kids, um, early years. And now, at the age of 20, do you feel like you have more of an obligation to get to know this 20-year-old kid than you have an obligation to get to know other 20-year-old kids?
I think you have an obligation to fulfill what they want out of that relationship at that point.
Why?
Why? Because you have failed to fulfill your obligation previously, and now you have done them harm, and the only way you can correct that, well, if it can be, you can't correct it. But
What if
the
I
only
was in
thing you can do,
jail for something that I didn't commit?
yeah, it's still up to them though.
Right, but I did nothing wrong.
Yeah,
I
it's
missed
fine.
their
It's still
childhood. I
it
missed
is.
their childhood for a reason, for reasons that are not within my control, and it's
Yeah,
not my fault.
that doesn't grant you the right to disrespect their boundaries as an adult.
Wait, their boundaries include a relationship with me? That's not how boundaries work.
Wait, sorry, my headset's the battery's low, but it's gonna be fine. It was just saying stuff to me. What'd you say?
Okay, cool. Yeah. They want a relationship with me.
Oh,
I
yeah.
was just in jail for 20 years for a crime that I didn't commit.
Yeah.
I'm now out of jail,
Yeah.
having missed their entire childhood. They're now 19, 20 years old, whatever they are.
Yep.
And they want a relationship with me.
Yep.
Do I have an obligation to have a relationship with them?
Yeah.
Why?
Why? Because because the status in which you had when they weren't there was an absent parent, and you have
But it's not my fault.
doesn't matter if it's your fault. I don't care about that. What I care about is that your child existed in that state because of you, and
Because of me? No, it's not. It's because of the state.
no, no, no,
The
no, no, no,
state.
no, 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 no. It is because of you because you had a child.
Okay.
There is
So because I had
there's
a
an
child.
implicit duty when you create life
Yeah.
to take care of it.
Okay. So I have an obligation to take care of the life that I created. And so therefore I have an obligation at the age of 20. What if
And you've never
I have
fulfilled
a
any of it. So I think that
what if I
you're
have a 30 I was a perfectly good parent. I raised my kids fine. I have a 35-year-old kid who I just don't feel like it. Like I raised them, but I just don't feel like it. They're just like, eh. And they're 35. They're doing fine.
I think that it's up to the kid.
But I don't feel like it. They're 35.
Okay, I mean you can do that, but I would for me that
But
would be
is that
bad.
wrong of me to do even now that they're 35?
I'm letting you know that it would be wrong for me to do that because
That's
that's my
okay. This is what's frustrating about this. You're not willing to make any moral statements about society writ large.
um.
That's very bad. You should be
That's
able
not
to
true
do
that
that.
I'm not willing to do any, but
I just asked you.
relationship. I'm not
Yeah.
willing to do it on all. So yeah, you can ask me some things, and I will not, but some things I am willing to.
So okay. If you are a deontologist, there are certain behaviors that are worse and there are other behaviors that are better, right?
Yeah, better's better.
Okay. So I'm asking, is the behavior of having a relationship with your 35-year-old kid better or worse?
Assuming that your child wants to have a relationship with you at that point because they have their own autonomy as an adult, it would
Yeah.
be better.
Okay. I get a call as a 65-year-old and there's some random 40, whatever, 35-year-old who's like, hey, I really want to have a relationship with you.
Yeah.
And I go, it's not my kid, just some random 35-year-old. I really want to have a relationship with you. I want you to take me out to dinner. I want you to pay for it. I want you to do this like, once every 2 months. I also want you to like sometimes babysit my kids. I want you to blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, no, click.
Yeah.
Is that wrong for me to say no, click?
No.
Okay, so there's some
I
obligations.
said there's biological.
Fine. No, but it's not biological because if I raised the kid and I wasn't their biological parent, it would still be there.
There. Okay.
It's not
In that,
biological.
wait,
Don't
yes.
say
Hey,
biological if you
hang
don't
on.
mean it.
I do mean it. I'm saying there is a biological component when you have a kid. If you're raising a kid that's not your own biological kid, there is a different mechanism here that also ties you to duty to
If
them.
you're
But
leaning
different.
on biological, if you're leaning on biological, then adopted kids aren't as genuinely the children of their adopted parents as if they were biological.
I don't know what
Don't
genuine
lean on
means.
biological.
I'm saying that I'm not leaning on it. I'm saying that there is an undeniable component of responsibility to a child that your genetic material helps create.
What if this is a kid who you provided sperm to a sperm bank? Do you have an obligation to those kids? Is it
You
parallel
can.
to an adopt? Is
You
it
can.
parallel? Is it parallel? Does it supersede the relationship of an adopted parent of kids?
No.
Okay, so stop talking about biological if it's not a thing that's relevant.
It is relevant.
It's
not the only thing that's relevant.
oh, good Lord.
If you donate sperm to somebody and those
Yeah.
people die, and somebody from the state comes and says, "Hey, the parents of a kid that you donated sperm to has died. They have nowhere to go." I would say it is on you to take care of it because there is a biological component that you now are in a position where you are the only person that can provide. You can provide something to that kid that other people cannot provide.
And
it is by
you
your
convinced me.
actions.
That's a situation. Yeah, you've convinced me. That's a situation where that would be valid. Okay.
And I'm not leaning on the biological, but I'm saying that in cases where the biology can make a difference here, then it is on you to take responsibility for that.
Okay.
However, if you adopt a kid, your responsibility to them is now on you because you said, in light of anybody else taking up this responsibility for you, I'm taking this responsibility for you. And that's not something you get to back away from.
Yeah, okay. You convinced me. That's valid. Okay. So you have an obligation to your kid. You feel that you have no obligations to your siblings.
Not inherently. You can build up some though. If you have earned their trust, if you have developed a relationship where you've earned their trust and they now rely on you for things, then yeah, now you do. But it's not inherent there. They didn't choose for you to their choices did not result in you coming into this world. If you guys don't get along, I don't see that it is inherently good to try to force that to happen. However, if you do work on it and it does happen, that's nice. Now you guys have created a relationship where there probably is some duties there.
All
So
right,
for
I feel like
me,
yeah.
I've always considered my friends that I've held for a long time and developed senses of duty with them to be more important than a lot of people that I'm related to, because these people had no societal pressure to do the things they've done for me. They could have just chosen to do anything else instead, and they have like ingratiated me with all the things that they have done, and we have developed these duties to one another naturally, whereas the other one is just sort of caused by pressures from other people. They've actually earned this status rather than just having it expected upon them, and I think that is more worthy of praise and consideration than one that is just simply expected because traditionally we expect it. Like
All
I
right.
like I don't give a
I feel
fuck
like
about my
yeah.
heroin
I
addict
feel like
cousin who steals her fucking dying mom's pain medication. I don't care about her. I don't care about her at all. I don't want to be around her. I don't ever want her to be around me. However, if my best friend is broke down in Florida and he has no way to get home, uh, I'm gonna make some risky financial decisions to make sure that he gets home if he needs help.
all right. I feel like we've exhausted. Yeah. I feel
Well,
like I
I hope you
understand where you're
understand
coming
where
from.
my sense of responsibility and duty comes from.
I do. I think that it's warped. I think that you are wrong.
I
Um,
understand.
I think that the implications of the worldviews that you're describing uh, get to outcomes that are significantly worse, particularly for children, but even for adults. And I think that the fact that you don't feel like you have an obligation to siblings and you don't feel like you have an obligation to aunts and uncles and to cousins is bad. And you should feel those obligations. And
I
those
think they
are
can
ties
develop.
that matter. And that they're ties you have an obligation to preserve.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
I don't think so at all.
as best you can. Doesn't mean that you always are able to. That doesn't mean that you're always able to have them be regular members of your life, but it does mean that there are always going to be people who are particularly relevant and worthy of consideration, even if they're people who you have complicated and difficult feelings and experiences with.
Oh, I think you're totally within your rights to completely cut them off.
That's not what I said. I think that you are within your rights to completely cut them off, but that's different than to say that they are irrelevant members of your life, and that's different than to say that they
If it's, I
no
don't think you
longer
owe them
matter.
anything inherently.
I think that you owe them to try.
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah.
But I do think that that idea is like a beautiful idea. Um, but there's no part of me that that resonates with.
I don't quite believe you,
Oh.
but that's okay.
And maybe it's just my bias from having really, really shitty people in my family that I just don't.
Yeah, I have shitty people in my family as well.
Well, yeah, I'm
I
saying
don't
it could
believe
be my
that you say
bias
that.
is formed from having my experiences with the shitty people. It just may be the case that how you experienced those things and how you felt about it and the ways that you tried end up informing how you feel about it. I'm not, but I think it's hard to
Yeah,
convince me on
I
this.
think that so I'm
I'm
going to make
willing
a
to
parallel.
admit that I
When I
may be
was
more unreasonable than I think I am here, but I
when I
don't
was
think
in
so.
college, we this is a pretty dark analogy, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Um, we were studying the Holocaust, and I was the only Jewish person in the room. But there was a group of, you know, relatively well-intentioned, but perhaps a little bit stupid um, uh, kids in the class with me.
Oh boy.
Um,
they weren't that stupid. I went to Carnegie Mellon. They weren't that stupid, but they were somewhat stupid, or at least not thinking this through particularly hard. Uh-oh. Did I lose you?
No, am I not here? Oh, what
Your
happened to my
camera just
camera?
broke down.
That's weird. Give me 1 second. Let me stop it and
Yeah, no
start
worries.
it. Why didn't that stop it? Oh, let's see. Oh, okay, there we go.
Success. Okay. So yeah, we were in class and we were discussing the Holocaust, and we were discussing specifically prior to the camps proper. Oh, it went down again.
Yeah, I know. It froze, so I unplugged it. I'm gonna try to restart it. It's a really good camera. I don't know what the deal is.
Yeah, from Elgato. Elgatos are expensive.
Yeah, I was lucky to get it. They're hard to actually find in stock too.
Yeah,
It might be overheating. It's been really hot.
that's fine. We're coming to the end, I think, anyway. But I do want to give this this little analogy.
Yeah.
So as long as we can both be heard, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, the question was, we were discussing the mass killings of Jews prior to the camps themselves being built, and prior to everyone being forced into internment camps and into ghettos. And we were discussing why it was that neighbors would often turn in their Jewish neighbors. And, you know, a lot of people there were like, oh, that's monstrous. Oh, I can't believe they did that. I'm I don't get it. They were friends with these people. They were, you know, they worked with these people, blah, 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 blah. I don't understand how you would turn your neighbor into the Nazis, even if you were relatively anti-Semitic, how you would get away with doing that when you know this person intimately. And the answer that I provided is that actually those are the people that it's easiest to turn in, because it's very easy to have an intimate relationship, a long-term relationship with a person, and come to the realization that you hate them, or that you love them, but including that you hate them. That's a thing that lots of reasonable, self-perceived good people come to, that the people intimately involved in their lives are monsters. It's a lot harder to explain to yourself why you're not a monster when you're lukewarm about people who are intimately involved in your life. And I think that when I'm describing this obligation, it's a like to that, right? Like, it sounds monstrous to say that you turn in your neighbors to the Nazis, but it's almost more monstrous to neither turn them in nor stop the Nazis, because you have to admit to yourself that you are a person who recognizes that what's happening to them is monstrous. And despite the obvious sense of obligation that you have, that you're not willing to protect them. And I think that that's sort of where I think that yeah, there are ties that are really important, and recognizing those ties to be important doesn't necessarily mean that the person is someone who is all good, or the person is a monster. But recognizing that complexity in the people around you, I think, is really important, and recognizing those obligations to the people around you, I think, is really important. And grappling with that kind of relationship, it's perfectly reasonable to not save the Jews from 3 towns over. But it's a lot different to not save the Jews next door.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Also, like given the what you just laid out, there is an obvious those people are full of shit who said like how could they do that. I don't think that I don't believe them because most people would preserve themselves too.
But it wasn't
That's
just
egregious.
self-preservation, right? Because no one was going to get in trouble for failing to report something that they didn't necessarily have an obligation to know, but they chose to report.
Yeah, you have a bunch of bad guys who are looking for people like you with guns, and if you help them out, you're probably not going to be first on the chopping block.
No, I'm saying Christian neighbors of Jewish neighbors would
Uh,
turn in their Jewish neighbors
oh,
as
I thought you were saying
Christians
I thought
who
you were
were
talking about
not.
Jews that turned in other
No, no,
Jews.
no. No, I'm saying Christians who turned in Jews.
Oh, gotcha.
Christians who had grown up as friends of these Jews, Christians who, had gone to were close to these Jews, knew them intimately, would turn in these Jews. And I think it's relevant to think about why that is and what those kinds of relationships represent.
Are you suggesting that it represents anything more than tribalism?
I think it represents a. I think that if you're willing to understand uh, love and hatred not as opposite emotions, but both as um, representations of attachment with a person.
Yeah, they're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, I think that turning in a Jew represents that there is attachment. Um,
Necessarily?
in those circumstances, not in all circumstances, but in
Okay.
those circumstances, I think it was representative of attachment. Um, and
Oh,
I
because they picked
think
the other ones over instead of their Jewish neighbors? Is that what you're saying?
no,
Or
no,
turning in
no,
their
because,
neighbors?
because because they weren't going. These aren't people who are going around searching out Jews, but these are people who are turning in those specific Jews, the Jews that they knew most intimately. And I think it's
Oh,
because there is an understanding of those attachments. It's it's totally understandable how you could hate someone who you've lived with and been close to throughout your life. It's very difficult to be lukewarm about them, to consider them to be irrelevant. I think to consider someone who's close to you to be irrelevant, um,
yeah, if you
and
grow to hate somebody, then there's a sense of
yeah,
betrayal there.
well, not even that there's a sense of betrayal. There's a sense of like, um,
Well, and like loss,
there's a
I
sense of
guess.
intimacy. There's a sense of intimacy that comes with having that kind of a relationship. And so, when you're describing your even just internal, not even to other people, but when you're describing your relationship to a person that you've known for that long of a time, and you are going to have views. And whether those views are positive or negative, having views is the normal way of things. And not having views is not a normal way of things. And so when you're describing a relationship with, a person who you went on a date with for one day, you might just not have a view on them. But I think that it is monstrous to a degree that is more monstrous than killing Jews, um, to not have a view on the Jews who lived next door. And I would say the same about family. I would say that it is more monstrous not to have a view on your sister, on your cousin, on your uncle, aunt, whatever, than to consider them evil and to hate them.
Wait, when did I say you don't have a view? I just said you don't have an obligation to them.
Um,
You may choose to not
yeah,
foster that relationship because of your view.
yeah. But there are
So yeah, it
views
would be
that are
very incredibly bizarre to even be capable of not having a view on them.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
like
Okay. So you
I would
have
probably
you have
want to read like some kind of like psychological literature on how you could be devoid of having a view on like your brother or sister, aunt or uncle,
Mhm.
unless you just never
Yeah,
met
yeah,
them.
sure.
Maybe even
But even if you
then,
don't, even then,
yeah,
you'd still
yeah,
have, yeah.
you'd have
Um,
those feelings that are caused by not knowing them and
yeah,
developing weird views that maybe just don't pan out in reality.
yeah. Um, yeah. I think that your kid has views on all of your partners.
Hmm.
And I think that uh, your kid's views on your partners uh, ought to be able to be separated from your kid's views on you or your views on your partners. Um, and as a result of the fact that they're children, it can't be divorced from one another. Those
Sure.
aren't separate, they're a single thing. And that means that the most intimate connections and the most important connections that your kid has with adults are um, being clouded by your relationships, and they're serving as second fiddle in a way that I think is dangerous.
I understand that. But I think as an active and I would say to be a good parent, you are able to take these things into account and navigate these situations in a way that is appropriate.
Gotcha.
But
Okay.
I also think that there's some people that can't, and if you can't, fucking don't. You either need to figure out how you can, or you don't get to do that shit until you do. Um,
Yeah. Um,
and I would
yeah.
100%, if you are ever arguing with somebody, or if you ever do argue with somebody who is clearly shown to not be able to do that, and they're abdicating for the kind of lifestyle that I have, you can tag me in, and I'll stand right beside you and fucking explain to them how they are fucking it up royally for their
Right.
kid, and
So
they're
then
making
there
people
comes
like me
to,
look bad too.
yeah. So then there comes to a question of like, um, when you're offering advice, uh, because you're describing yourself as sort of an activist, you're describing someone who's trying to
Hmm?
sort of build up. Yeah. Um, so when you're offering advice publicly, are you providing that advice in a way that may increase the chances of people engaging in those kinds of harmful behaviors, um, if even through a degree of like misunderstanding of what it is that you do?
So I would say that anytime you're giving advice to anybody who has a kid, you're going
Hmm.
to be engaging in some form of risk. But the purpose of giving advice is that you are going to do it, hopefully, with the best interest of the person
Right.
and their kids in mind.
So you
When
would
I
be
give
willing to,
advice about polyamory, so somebody actually, Smith got me in touch with somebody who needs advice about their polyamorous relationship, and I just sort of touched base with them real quick. And I'm not willing to give them any advice at all until I get a very clear picture of what's going on, because this is a really nuanced thing, and I don't think it's any kind of responsible at all to give somebody advice about something that
mhm.
is, as you've said, there's not a ton of literature out there. There's literature out there, but there's not a ton of it. Uh, so we don't have like a lot of stuff to back it up. So we need to be very
Yeah.
careful and examine the full picture before we tell somebody, "I think you should do this." And I
So
may
there
not even
are
use exactly that kind of language by saying like, "I think you should do." I would
so
probably
there
give them a lot
are
of things to consider.
there are blanket statements that may be individually avoidable, but are reasonable as blanket statements that you'd be willing to make. For example, if you have had issues with alcohol in the past, don't drink in front of your kid is probably a reasonable statement that you'd, I'm sure, be comfortable making. For example, if you are, um, uh, if there are people, if you have adult friends who
you worry are not particularly stable, don't let those friends be in front of your kid, and
Yeah,
maybe even cut those adults out of your life entirely. Um,
sure.
uh, these are blanket statements that are reasonable rules to be trying to provide to people as advice, even when you haven't understood the individual circumstances. Are you willing to make as a blanket statement, regardless of the individualizable, perhaps there are individual moments where it might be reasonable? Are you willing to say, writ large, you should try to have um, dual parent households over single parent households?
Try to have. I think I'd have to add some words to that, but at the risk of being pedantic, I'd say that I would generally make that blanket.
Okay.
I think that we should probably talk about like um what's not okay to endure to provide that and stuff,
Mhm.
but uh with the understanding that that's where I'm at, like yeah, like we don't
Okay.
need to
So
get
you're
super
willing
heavy
to,
into it, but
yeah.
yeah, there's certain caveat stuff, but like yeah, it's not terrible general advice to give, but you should be open to challenges as to why that shouldn't be.
Okay. Would you be willing, with an understanding there might be challenges and all of that, to give as general advice that people should be in monogamous relationships
No,
when having children?
no.
Okay. Cool. I feel like we've both gotten an understanding of where we're both at. Do you have any final thoughts before I leave?
Um, yeah, it's not something I expected that I would have said, but after watching the conversation that you just had yesterday, I'm really surprised that I genuinely think we both made some progress with each other.
Mhm.
I have a pretty good understanding of where you're at, and I am significantly more sympathetic to it. And
Mhm.
there's even some moments in this stream where, particularly when you're talking about your experience when I was in college, talking about the Holocaust, that got kind of intimate. I think that there's a little bit more depth to you than I thought, and I respect you more after having talked to you.
Yeah, I would say the same. Okay, cool. Have a good one. Appreciate
Thanks.
it.
You too. What the fuck? Oh no. Oh god, I hope that echo wasn't there the whole time. I didn't hear it at all. Jesus Christ. Um, I know Tornado said that I was being pretty wild and unreasonable. I don't think that I was. I might have worded something weird when he said that about rights and wrongs. I think I was just being a little overly careful. I was supposed to talk to Kilo, the giant, tonight. But he's unavailable. So I might do, I don't know, like a poker stream or something, in lieu of that, uh, in the evening. But that's it for me for now. That was a good talk. I like Quibbles a lot more. Unlike most people that strongly disagree with me about things, he actually seems to have like really like personally thought out reasons for things. At times it came off like it was just like tradcon ideas, but it seems like he has a more independent reason for thinking the things that he thinks, and I certainly respect that. So that was pretty cool. All right. Oh yeah, I meant to say it was really into the conversation. I could say it. Invalid VN and Tryhook. Thanks for following me. I appreciate you. And thanks for chatting too, Tryhook. And again, thank you, Froggy Style, for giving me I guess not super chat for a super sticker. I appreciate you. It's always super cool. When you throw a little bit of money my way, I don't ever ask for it, so it's always a little bit more special to me when somebody decides to throw it my way. All right. Hopefully, I'll see you tonight if I don't get